morning, everybody. My name is May Sim, and I'm a psychological astrologer with 17 years of experience. So this webinar is titled Halftime Strategies for 2021 and Beyond. And I'm starting my presentation, so you should see it on your Zoom channel. Please let my team know if you can see my presentation clearly. Now, today's presentation is going to answer some very essential questions that are on everyone's minds. And this includes things like, when will the COVID-19 pandemic end? First question on the mind. And the second is that, as reported here on Fortune magazine, why is it that when everyone talks about how we are all recovering after the COVID pandemic, but that not everybody is feeling the recovery? So although some of you may be watching this webinar for the very first time, this is by no means my first webinar. In fact, this is the 8th webinar in my series of what some people have nicknamed the Tsunami webinars. But the thing is, some people think that I started in April 2020 giving public predictions, but this is in fact not the case. I have done this for quite a long time. So even going back as far back as in December 2019. So this is way before COVID actually hit. Now, I went on Facebook and I warned people. I predicted that in 2020, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs and businesses are going to be in trouble in 2020. Now, you have to remember that at the time in December, people were buoyant, they were optimistic, they were really looking forward to 2020 as a recovery. And I was deemed a doomsayer. That is like, oh, this woman is like, saying all these nasty things about the world. And I got a lot of hate mail, I have to tell you that. So I was undaunted. Now, 3 days after this, 5th of December was that. 3 days after that, I went back on Facebook and I said that this 2020 is going to mark the end of a 200-year cycle that we've all been in. And that at the bottom, I said that those who do not know what I'm about to reveal are going to be blindsided. Now, among all the people who decided that astrology was bogus, there was a small group of people who actually did listen. So I was encouraged, and that's why I decided I created an event called Dawn of the New Millennium. And on the 18th of January 2020, mind you, this is before the pandemic actually hit, I rented an auditorium. We filled it up with a bunch of people, and for me to be able to warn people about what was actually coming up. And you can actually see the PowerPoint slide there. I've got Harry and Meghan there. So a lot of people have been very wowed by how some of the things that show up on my PowerPoint slides become our future headlines. So what I'm about to share also is that in January 2020, I also warned everybody that online conferencing was going to be up, while the concept of flying to another country to have your business meetings was going to be a thing of the past. And a lot of people didn't understand what I was trying to say. They were like, oh, che, I also know that online conferencing is up and that traveling is going to be down. But what I told the audience was, no, you don't understand. It's happening like right now. It's not something that will fold out in years to come. It is like now. So as you all know now that actually Zoom went up, airlines died. So this was the headline just 4 months after the January event, that Zoom is now worth more than the world's top 7 airlines. That's an insane headline that nobody ever expected to see. Now, I went on that for the rest of 2020, there were several webinars in which I shared my predictions publicly so that people could prepare and to move their lives along. So a lot of these came out in the form of videos. You will easily find them on YouTube. And on the 14th of April, I ran my very first online webinar. I had no choice because COVID, right? And on the 14th of April, I warned, at least most of my audience are based in Singapore, I warned them that as early as the very next day, COVID numbers were going to rise. Now, at the time, Singapore was in circuit breaker, but it wasn't like emergency situation yet. Now, I want you to look at this graph. On the 14th of April, I ran my webinar. On the 15th, numbers started to climb very, very, very rapidly. And we started to make headlines internationally for the number of cases that we were getting. Now, and I didn't just stop there. In fact, throughout the entire year, there were at least about 6 to 7 webinars. And on the 8th of August, this was the last webinar of 2020. And one of the things that I told my audience was, after this webinar, you won't see me until January. You won't need me for the rest of the year because the COVID numbers are going to stabilize. And you're going to find that Singapore is like kind of stable after August 2020. And again, I was correct that right after that, the COVID numbers kind of disappeared for the rest of the year. Now, at this point, I'm going to take a quick pause And I want to address the people who are not the first time in my webinars. You have already gone through this journey with me, and you actually know firsthand how accurate these predictions are and how it has made a difference to so many business owners, freelancers, and people out there. So I'm going to ask my team to post a link right now. Now, that link is to my Facebook channel. So although some of you may be watching this on Zoom, but this is also being broadcast live and free on my YouTube or on my Facebook channel on Facebook Live right now. So if you do know people in your life, and especially those of you who have been on my webinars before, in the spirit of the air era and of contributing to community, please help me to share this on your social media channels. Get your guys to come online. You know, it's like, it's really important that they hear this about what's happening in 2021. And if you ask me, more importantly, what's happening in 2022. And when I'm not in the habit of putting my reputation on the line and speaking publicly to people if I'm not absolutely sure that what I'm about to say will come true. Okay, so please help me to share, okay? So next thing is that earlier this year, in January, I did a webinar called The Rules Have Changed. And those of you who were on that webinar or who have seen it on YouTube, you'll find this particular slide very familiar. And let me show you what I actually said about COVID. Let's talk about COVID, right? And at the time in January, the COVID numbers were down, and we were all very excited about the prospect of vaccines coming to Singapore. So let me recall this slide that I presented in January, that if you see here, I wrote here restrictions to growth. And what I told the audience was that somewhere by about the early part of February, as you can see from here, that we're going to start to see some restrictions, control measures will start showing up, even though the vaccines were here. And I was correct. That around the time Chinese New Year, we will all remember that you were being told that you were limited to the number of people who could visit you. So a lot of those control measures started creeping up on us just about February. Now, also in that same webinar, I also warned everybody that just about, if you can see here, like the end of April, this is exactly the same slide, that I've written that if there's an illness that might start to spread in Singapore. Now, I was very careful when I told the audience that it's not necessarily COVID. Of course, everyone has COVID obsession, and the first thought is like, yeah, COVID, you know, but I need you to know that astrology doesn't have a planet for COVID. It just says illness. So of course, logically speaking, it looked like COVID. It could have been something else. But then again, I was correct. So if you see that around the time in August when I said that the cases would end off, and they kind of did. Look at that, you know, the graph disappeared, right? And then just about late April, exactly as I said, the numbers started to climb. Right. So the thing is, why am I showing you this? Is because especially for the people who are watching my webinars for the very first time, you might be in that space where you are like, oh, you know, this woman said some very crazy things there, like doesn't make sense, like don't feel like it's going to happen. The point here is that I've proven over the last 18 months that I have been accurate. I have been accurate so far. And I'm showing you this because today I might be saying a couple of things that might sound a bit strange to you, which doesn't seem to make sense right now. And I just want you to know that I have a track record and I've been accurate so far. Okay, so of course, I also said that now, this period that we are all in, right? We are 19 June today. And this is where a lot of things stack up. Now, I'm also showing you through this example that when my color bars are very scary, and when they all stack up, it tells you that things are happening. And I'm going to interpret for you astrologically how those indicators are going to affect us in our lives. So as you can see, and I'm sure if you live here in Singapore, you know exactly that just about the middle of May and where we are right now is when the enhanced measures have shown up. So a lot of people are very concerned now because I was reading the papers this morning, and it seems that the case numbers have gone up. So a lot of people are concerned, like, you know, is COVID going to continue being a problem here? Now, I want you to notice that if you look at the stack up place that I showed there, that just about early July is when the stack up ends. So I understand that now is 19th of June, the numbers are still high. You're going to start to see the numbers start to taper off a bit after early July. So I think that's good news for quite a lot of people, okay? So I'll just give this to you right at the very beginning. Okay, so moving on to today's topic. Today's webinar is 3 hours, and those of you who have been here before, you know my webinars are chock full of information. Historically, I found that people like to take a lot of notes throughout the presentation. So feel free, if you feel like, you know, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you want to take down, feel free to run and go and get a notepad and a pen right now. But I also want to show you just about what I'm going to cover for today. Now, I anticipate that I'm only going to have one break today, okay? So that you just have to arrange your toilet visits along the way, okay? Trust me, you don't want to miss any of this. And also, I have been very ultra confident that I can do this in 3 hours, and I want you to know that I'm speaking live, okay? So I'm trying my best to stay to what I promised, a 3 hour, because a lot of people complain that my webinars are very long, but please forgive me if I should overrun, okay? So for your sake, see if you can like not arrange something at 2 p.m. because if I should overrun, you probably want to stick around, okay? So the next first things that I want to cover is what is Singapore expecting for the rest of the year 2021, and then also I also want to talk to continue my narrative on the fall of an era, because a lot of people are starting to see that what I predicted way back in 2019 is becoming a reality. So let me explain to you what else can we see in the coming months, possibly even the years, about how the Earth era is going to see its massive decline. And also, I think now that I'm going to introduce this idea of post-COVID, because I think for a lot of people, you start to realize that although people are still freaking out, but COVID will end. At some point, it's not going to be a major problem in the world anymore. But the big question now is not about COVID. And I've maintained it's not COVID that's the problem. It's what happens after COVID. So I'm going to talk about two very major post-COVID developments that we will all see sweeping across the world during this period. And this time around, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to look at a few other countries. So those of you who are logging in from places like the UK, Hong Kong, as well as our friends in Malaysia, I'm going to take a glance at your charts for the first time in my webinar series. And after that, of course, I'm going to talk about Singapore. So, and coming from on the backs of what is going to happen, what I think is going to happen in 2022, I think we need to put on our critical thinking caps and really consider what then do people really need to start doing right now, today, and not next year. Okay, so how are you going to thrive in this new era? Right, so let's go get the COVID-19 question out of the way first. Everybody wants to know, okay? Now, so what I'm about to show you, and for all the countries that I'm going to cover later, just so you know that every country has a birth chart. And it happens for Singapore is on the 9th of August, 1965. But for the sake of this COVID conversation, I'm going to focus on this thing called Chiron, and it's that green thing there, which is in the number 6 house in Singapore's astrological chart. So when we look at Chiron, it's like pain, loss in the areas dealing with health. And so far, I found that through my calculations that every time Chiron gets affected in Singapore's timeline, we tend to get like epidemics, right? So we've had a few in the past, like those SARS, whatever, and it's always Chiron, okay? So as I said, right now, we are in this yellow section here. And I also want to give you a sneak preview that at the end of the year, you can see here from December, January, February, suddenly this green color thing shows up, which tells you the situation changes quite significantly. So of course, right now, this is a news article from just about 3 days ago. We can see that the government is now re-evaluating, because if they had thought that we were going to reopen on the 13th of June last week, but it turned out to not be the case. You know why? Because our this period haven't passed yet. So it needs to get past that early July before some of you are going to see that the opening up is going to happen a lot more rapidly. So that part is easy, right? So the next thing I want to show you here is that there are other developments that are affecting Singapore's chart as well, that will give us some idea about how this COVID thing is going to play out for the rest of the year. So I want you to pay attention to, if you look at, I added one more line to my color bars, and you see it's Jupiter tri-Mars, and that black section that is converging around the September-October period. Okay, so you can see I colored it in black color. But interesting thing is, like, let's figure out what this Jupiter tri-Mars really is. And as you can see, it started on the 26th of March. So let's go back in recent history, and you realize that in February, so this was in mid-February when the vaccine started arriving in Singapore. So Singapore considered very fast already, that in about a month's time, that a lot of the vaccine centers were already set up. Just about the late part of March was when the vaccination started in earnest. I'm sure you all remember this. So what I'm showing you here is that Jupiter tri-Mars is a fight, and it's a positive fight in the sense that we are doing things to sort of address the situation. So I don't see a problem with that. And so I'm going to add a few more other of these bars showing up. And what I really want to cut the story short, okay, so I'm going to sort of focus everyone's attention in October of this year. So that's coming up in about another 3-4 months, right? So October is, I'm going to interpret all of those color bars in English, all right? So the first is that Singapore is going to significantly increase our control of COVID-19. And it will involve some measure of a restriction of personal freedom. So some people are going to complain and say, hey, May, you are very vague. But sometimes I'm really not that vague. If you think about that, means they're going to restrict things like personal freedom and personal choice, just saying, okay? And that the whole country will gear up for a fight. And this is a positive fight. It's not like we langa each other, but rather it's that we have an enemy that we want to attack. And that not everyone is going to agree with that consensus, but it is the correct way forward, okay? And also, did you find that the general attitude in Singapore, all of us, okay, we are going to change into an attitude of action taking, rather than we just sit there and be scared and be suspicious, that people are actually going to take action. So you're going to draw your own conclusions about what you think is going to happen in October, okay? And also the attitude on the ground is going to be a lot more humanitarian, that our purpose is not for self, but rather is for group, and very community oriented. And for those of you who understand this earth air era thing, people are going to be more air oriented. Okay, so the good news is that from October onwards, it seems that Singapore does get a grip on this COVID-19 issue. So, and for Singapore at least, okay, the COVID-19 story ends off on a pretty positive note. Okay, so I'm just going to click through these so that I'll show you what is here. But if you look at this blue triangle, in astrology, we call this a grand trine. And what this means is that the people in general do not have a problem with what's going on. So that means, is there activity? Yes. So if you sort of like, scroll, like take a glance and scan down the words that I'm sharing here, is that now, is it true that there's been a crisis, it's disrupted all our home lives and domestic lives? But by and large, Singaporeans are very accepting of it right now. There are a lot of jokes on WhatsApp and people are just laughing and joking about this circuit breaker thing. So are people actually like pissed off, angry? Not really, right? So and we found that technology has come into our homes, and our relationship with our leaders now are a lot more casual and it's a lot more authentic. There's a lot more of that sharing that's going on. So are there disruptions? Yes, I think. And when it comes down to businesses, a lot of businesses that have not adapted are still struggling. But also, by and large, if you look at the very last one, if you see from 20th of November to 18th February, so it's like more or less end of the year, you find that there's beauty, there's happiness on the ground, and that we are going to show a lot of appreciation to those in institutions. So be prepared. You're going to start to see a lot of award giving and like well done, pat on the back, that kind of stuff. Okay, so if I were to put all of this onto a timeline, I want to focus your attention on like this December, January, February period, and I think January. So if I were to interpret all of this, you'll find that people have taken the disruptions in our strike. Okay, and once the strict control that I predict in October occurs, you'll find that after that, the situation improves drastically. Okay, so that as people are like, oh, alpha, beta, what, gamma, delta, now the people are worried about delta virus. I think it's going to be a bit of a temporary situation. Okay, and there will be greater integration of technology on the ground. Some people think it's a good thing, and other people have concerns about the technology is on the ground, but you have to decide for yourself. Yeah. And of course, giving love and recognition to those who have fought. And beyond February 2022, have a look at that. You see the red bar? And the red bar, Neptune conjunct Chiron, is an indicator for when the disease is bad in our country. But after the 18th of February 2022, I have found from my calculations that disease and illness is no longer a highlight on my calculations. Now, I'm not a health practitioner, and really you have to go and ask a doctor to get a better news. But I have noticed that I'm not the only person who has said that COVID just showed up in the middle of the night. And it could be that the situation might just disappear in the middle of the night as well. And a lot of people have asked me, like, when is COVID going to end? And I don't think that's the right question. I don't think COVID as an illness is going to end, just like scarlet fever and tuberculosis still present in the world. But I think the real question is, how far is COVID an actual problem that is causing big issues for people? And once those issues end, is COVID going to still be around? Possibly, just like every other illness that has ever shown up in the world anyway, right? So everyone needs to put on your critical thinking cap. Yeah, there's just a bit more thinking that's required at this point. Now, however, I have maintained since December 2019, long time ago, I've maintained that COVID is not the problem. And I've said again and again that as people move into COVID obsession, that it actually blinds us to what the real issue really is. So this timeline is very familiar to those who have been on my webinars before. And you know, this earth to air conversation is massive. But for the sake of the people who are first time on my webinars, I'm going to very quickly explain what this air era thing is. And this is necessarily speaking, because I have so much to cover today, it's not going to be a long explanation, but I have plenty of videos from past webinars that I explain Earth to Air in great detail. And I highly encourage you to go and watch it. It's free on my YouTube channel, okay? But the big point that I want to make here is that on the 22nd of December, just about 6 months ago, a very major event happened in human history, which it was a moment at which technically that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction moved into the sign of Aquarius. So some of you may have read newspapers and people got very excited about this conjunction. Now, why this particular one is very important is because in the past, so I want you to know that this conjunction thing actually happens every 20 years. So is it like a major thing? Do people like lose their minds about it? Not really. So that means what you see here is, of course, my timeline here starts from the early 1900s. But those of you who have been in my previous webinars know that this is a pattern that started from as early as the early 1800s. And it coincided with the growth of the Industrial Revolution. So that's when all the factories and education and banks and financial institutions started to rise just about that time. So if you see it in this olive color, it's because that is what we call the Earth era, where most of the focus is on things like money and productivity and whether or not people will be rich and whether they will have money in their bank account. So that has gone on for a very, very long time. But then in 1981, something shifted. So most of you will remember that 1981 was the year when things like the computers were introduced. Suddenly you went to the grocery store and the guy wasn't writing the numbers on the notebook anymore. And he had a nice little computer thing that he could, key. Last time you had to key in, now you just scan now, right? But the point was that in 1981 was when suddenly we had things like Napster, we had things like IRC, and then all the kids didn't want to play masak-masak anymore and they were all playing with video games. So that was the year when technology, as we know it today, digital technology started inching into our lives. And a very modern kind of engineering started showing up. And the funny thing was that was only a sneak preview, because actually after that, it went back into the year 2000, when suddenly the world went back into what I call money obsession. So that it became all about the price of shares that were going up. And if you started a business, all people wanted to know, they're not interested in your new technology. All they're interested in is like, this new technology can make money or not, huh? And how much money can IPO or not, huh? So that was the main focus between the year 2000 and the year 2020. So what became really interesting was that once we passed that 2020 mark, and I want to get you to sort of recall in recent history, right? Once we passed that mark, one of the first big things that hit the global headlines was Elon Musk and his little launch that could potentially take us to Mars, right? And so that actually sets the tone for what the air era is about. And I've given you a hint. It's not really about the things that we were crazy about between the year 2000 and the year 2020. Now, why am I then making such a big fuss about it? It's because right after this 2020 thing, that means from now moving forward, look at the color. It's like from now on, it does not ever go back into the Earth era anymore. So which means that this is why I've made such a big fuss about it. And I've spent so much of my time and effort warning people that you have to understand the Earth era is no more. So why this is really important is that it's not the first time it's happened in human history. Now, humans have been around for a long time. And every time the eras change, it results in the fall of a specific human era. So it doesn't mean that we all lie down and die or life ends. But I think life changes in a very, very massive way. Things like governments will change. Things like the way we draw lines between each other is going to change, and it's already happening. So I did my research and I wanted to know in the past, what actually happened. So just so you know that in the year 1226, was that there are some equivalents here, and I don't think it's rocket science for you to sort of see the similarities. Okay, so in 1226, in the 13th century, a similar thing happened, that a conjunction happened in the sign of Aquarius, and prior to that was almost 200 years of Earth era. So which means that what we are looking for now, if history repeats itself, then we should see that there is a whole period of of industrialization and people getting a bit like money crazy, and that we should also see a sneak preview of the air era, followed by going back into the earth, and after that, thereafter being in the air era. Now, the main difference between us right now and what happened in the 13th century was that their air era was very short. So basically, ours will last for 160 years. So for all the people who want to text me and ask me, like, how long is this air era going to last? Don't worry, okay? It will last way after your great-grandchildren are dead, okay? So don't worry so much about the water era, worry about right now, okay? So theirs was a bit shorter. So theirs was in 1305, they had a water era. So I did my research and I was looking for the equivalent of what the world is today. And my research brought me, and by the way, guys, I want to tell you that what I'm showing you here is purely what I have researched out from hours and weeks of just pure studying. And this here is the Song dynasty in China. And let me show you why I got so interested here, because the Song dynasty was in many ways described as the golden age at the time of wealth and production, and it starts to sound a bit like our current world. And just consider, okay, I'm just going to tell you a very quick one-line story and see if you can sort of see the similarities. Yeah. Now imagine that something along, let's see if my cursor shows up. Imagine if something that happens somewhere here in China breaks out, invades the entire China, and then after that spread to the rest of the world, right? See if that story sounds a bit familiar to you. Now, the difference was at the time, they didn't have anything like COVID, but they did have something that occurred somewhere there and invaded China and spread to the rest of the world, and that thing was called Genghis Khan. Right, so then of course some people will look at this map and go like, yeah, this is not the whole world, but last time the world wasn't so big. So the majority of the world's population was in that green area, and Genghis Khan did conquer the world at the time, just like our friend COVID-19. Okay, so that are there similarities? I don't know, you decide. Okay, but what has gotten me very interested about the Song dynasty is this. So this is a picture that is drawn from the Song dynasty, and you can see they have what is at the time considered high-rise buildings, and they were actually known for the ability to build high. And this is very interesting because that's exactly what happened with us in the Earth era. We built high-rise buildings in cities that were highly wealthy and very money focused. And on top of that, have a look at this. In fact, the Song dynasty is also very famous for having created something called paper money. Okay, and it was very interesting because they also had the very sophisticated banking system where people could borrow money and print money and print money and print money, and you see where I'm going with this, right? So and this particular book, if you're interested, you can go look for it. It's available for free online. But this is interesting because it was called How Paper Money was Involved with the Collapse of Song China. So go read it on your own time, but I want to read you the first paragraph from this book. And what I've written here is, not what I've written about, he's written here, is that it's fascinating for 3 reasons. Now, first, the Song is one of history's wealthiest golden ages, inventing military gunpowder, movable print, industrial textiles, windmills, and the canal-faring paddle boats. Innovations fueled by the mass production and commercialization of rice. There are some differences, but I think you should see the similarities. And I want you to look at the third point here, which is third, among the most significant inventions credited to the era is one that many of us carry every day, which is paper money. Right, and I think you see where I'm going with this. So in my studies, I started to wonder, now, would paper money also lead to the collapse of our Earth era? And I know a lot of people agree with this. But of course, like I said, let's put on our critical thinking caps. And now the first thing that most people jump onto is the idea of world debt. So this article was taken from 18th of February 2021, which is about 3 months ago. Let me tell you, the world debt is not this amount now. Okay, it's going up by the second. If you go to The Economist and you type world debt clock, you can actually see the world debt is just going up by the second. It's ridiculous, right? So, but the thing was, is it just world debt that is going to collapse our world? I sort of don't think so, because that world debt has been building for a long time. So unless something changes very drastically, it's like for a lot of people, it's like, but then they've been printing money for like a long time, right? So what would change really? So that's why I decided that it needs to be something more than just world debt. So what I'm about to show you is something that's totally new. I have never, I cannot pretend to be a financier. I tell you, if you know me personally, I don't know anything about banking or investments. I'm not really a big investor at all. But what I am showing you here is from a complete layman's perspective, and I'm very clear about the parameters that I'm looking for. So anything that I show you from here onwards, please, for heaven's sake, if you want to know more, please go to an actual financier, an actual banker, and please educate yourself properly. Don't just listen to an astrologer, okay? So when I did my research, I was specific about my criteria. I was looking for something that needed to look good on paper. So that means it is something that nobody is freaking out about, because it looks totally safe and very secure in the world. Now, the second criteria was that it needed to be something that could only be upset by what I call COVID permanent changes. So which means it's not COVID temporary changes, which means if your restaurant just closed down for 3 or 4 months, that it would not affect this, it would be safe. But only with the permanent issues that come with COVID, now that one would be under stress. I'm also looking for something that needed to have a large percentage of assets in most of the major countries. That means if you look at your US, Japan, China, UK, Singapore, Hong Kong, that kind of thing, that it needed to form significant enough. Otherwise, if it crashes, then it won't kill us, right? And also the other thing was that, because when I studied what happened in the Song dynasty, and you won't believe this, okay, do your research and see if I'm correct. The Song dynasty at one point printed so much money that basically their banking system failed. And you know what they did? They bailed out their banking system, right? So basically the government printed even more money so that they could bail out the banks. And which is why, because there was so much similarity, I was looking for something that is present in our banking system right now that could be similar to what happened in the 07 to 09 global financial crisis. So which meant that I'm looking for something that shows that humans don't really learn from our mistakes. Okay, so what I'm about to show you, again, I want to disclaimer, I don't know anything about all this. I really only learned about this about 3 weeks ago, okay? Please do your research, yeah? But, and it doesn't have to be this thing that I'm showing you. It basically, if I were you, I'll write down what is written here, these 4 criteria, and maybe there are other banking instruments that also fit the same criteria. You go and research, okay? But I discovered that there's something called a CLO, and it's called a collateralized loan obligation. So, and what they've written here in December 2020, 6 months ago, was that, that the rating from credit agencies was that it was stable, although assets may weaken. So for the people who have no idea what CLOs are, just like me 3 weeks ago, I did a bit of research, and the Atlantic had a very good diagram here that illustrates it very well. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, what those things are, they're like loans. But the thing is, if you notice all those squares, there are like companies that loan money from an institution. Now, if you see from the legend, you see BBB, and you notice there's no A there. So what this means is that most of these companies that are borrowing money, they are not what we call A grade. That means on their own, they might not be able to command the kind of loans, or please go and find a banker and get the right language. Yeah. But the point being is that it is like a bit like a gamble. Because the idea is, if I lend money to a company that is not like top grade investment, which means there's a possibility that you are very lousy and that you will not pay back the money that you borrowed. But when you group all of them together, the point here is, what are the chances that they will all default at the same time? Cannot be one, they will not all default at the same time. So what happens is, you see that black line that covers it. And what this means is that as long as the people who default, they're kind of like below the line, then the whole investment is very safe. So what I have discovered from my research is that the companies themselves are not the best companies, but the CLO is considered an AAA top grade investment because of the way it is structured, and it is so safe that no matter what happens, even if COVID happens, is totally fine. So this is on the right-hand side, you can see that if they default, now as long as it doesn't cross the line, this investment is rock hard, solid, safe. Now, what happened is on the left-hand side, you see this is a hypothetical CLO in April 2020 when COVID hit. So of course, some businesses closed down and then all the lousy ones bye-bye already, right? So then what happened was that they defaulted. But it has been shown so far that the CLOs were very resilient because they held their ground. So that was totally okay. So on the right-hand side, this is a hypothetical worst-case scenario that if the present economic conditions persist or if they worsen, then widespread defaults are not going to just hit the lower levels, but as long as it crosses the AAA level, then it's possible that the CLOs could be at risk. So I think everyone understands what I'm going at here. Now I'm just focusing on CLO because I don't know much about banking, but I'm sure that there are maybe other things that have kind of like the same situation more or less, right? So why this is very worrying is because I'm not the only one who's sort of sounding the alarm here. Because the MIT Sloan School of Management actually said that they found significant disconnect between what we know as credit agency ratings. So if you have a big credit agency, say, this one is AAA, right? But the actual risk, there's actually a disconnect. And this is something that I'm going to ask those of us here, even if you don't know anything about investments and credits and stuff, put on your critical thinking cap now. Is there a risk? You have to decide for yourself. Then the next thing here is that, well, I mean, if this is just one type of investment, not a big deal, right? But here's what I found. That as of, look at the date, May 28 is only what, 3 weeks ago, right? Just recently, Bloomberg said that the global CLO market is approaching $1 trillion worldwide, and sales are soaring, which means that they are still basically that amount is getting bigger and bigger by the second, guys, right? So that means, does it fulfill my criteria of it being a major percentage of developing the developed world's assets? Again, do your research and decide for yourself. Okay, so but what I'm trying to explain to you here is that, is there a potential risk, very, very real risk, that the whole system might go the Song dynasty? Okay, so it's definitely there, and all the patterns, all the indicators are there. So that's why when people tell you that, oh, this is an unprecedented thing in human history, I'm not sure about unprecedented. I don't think that they have looked far enough, right, into history. So the thing is, I went deeper into my research and I asked myself, what is the 2020 equivalent of the Song dynasty? Where in the world is the golden age strongest, and which country in the world right now? In fact, guys, if you're on Zoom or if you're on Facebook, right, please feel free to go there and make a guess. Tell me which country is the Song dynasty of our world right now. Who is leading the innovation and the banking system and the money? Now, if your guess, I'm seeing all the guesses coming in, interesting answers, and yeah, if your guess is the USA, I think so too. So I did extensive research and calculations into the USA. Okay, so what I'm about to show you here is that when we look at astrology transits, or this calculation of the planets, there are some transits that are what we call small transits, that those happen like, every year have one. So some things up, some things down. But there are some transits that are very, they have huge and massive impacts. Now, those transits are very few and far between, and they're usually very rare. And every time they show up, major things happen in that particular country. Now, what worried me was the fact that, and I actually presented some of this. I gave you a hint about it in the January webinar, because I knew that in this webinar, I would expand this. So there are some extremely worrying indicators that I see that's happening in the United States. And why should we all give a damn? Because things that happen in the US have a nasty history of affecting everyone else in the world. So there are 4 things that I'm going to cover in some detail, and I'm going to show you that some of those things, 3 out of 4 of those things, have happened in history before. And you need to agree with me, decide whether you agree with me that those things are probably going to put a very nice listing into human history years from now. So the first indicator that I see is called a Neptune opposite Neptune. So let me show you how this works. Right, when we have Neptune and it's opposite Neptune, this actually already happened. Now we are June 2021. From the last 2 months onwards, it started to grow. But I want you to know that a lot of these indicators, and you all need to understand that when big things happen in history, right, they're not one day, I mean, like if you look at history of like financial crashes, even world wars. They didn't one day have a war, you know, it was played out over a period of time. So I don't want anyone to go crazy and text me tomorrow and like, but then nothing happened. Like, seriously, you have to look at the whole period of time, okay? So you don't be lame, yeah, guys. Okay, so the next is that what does this mean? Number one, you'll see confusion of information. And people are not thinking straight. Their brain something wrong already. And it's easily spread. And it starts to affect the people on the ground. So it's not really like the leaders, but it's the people on the ground. Now, I looked into history and I realized that the United States has had this exact thing happen before. Now, this occurred before in history. The last time they had Neptune opposite Neptune was way back in 1857. That's a long time ago. And so all those things must have happened. Confusion, people don't think straight, and it was like spread like crazy like that. Now, I went on Google and it didn't take me more than 1 second to find this. So there's something called the Panic of 1857, and it was a financial panic in the United States caused by the declining international economy and the overexpansion of the domestic economy. And yada yada, because of the invention, it was the first financial crisis to spread rapidly throughout the United States. Now, what's important for all of us to realize here is obviously now nobody is using the telegraph. We have something that's even faster and even better than the telegraph, and it's called social media, right? So can you see history repeating itself? Now, I also want you to pay attention to the last sentence of the first paragraph, and it says, surfacing news of this circumvention set off the panic in Britain. So this was something that I took note of, and you can follow me later when I talk about the UK, and then you decide whether this could be the case as well. So now that I put it on the timeline, and yes, it has already started, but please take note of the black sections. As I show you lots and lots of color bars today, because I'm looking at a few countries, the black areas are when things happen, generally speaking, okay? So the next thing is Pluto conjunct Pluto. Now, I'm not the only astrologer to make a lot of noise about this Pluto conjunct Pluto. You can easily find information about it online, okay? So now Pluto is causing waves right now, because those of you who do know a bit of astrology may know that Pluto is the god of death. And even if things don't die, but you know, they have to die to be reborn, right? And I think Pluto tends to create this situation where it's my nickname for it. I call it dead body. In a sense, when there is a problem, but people just sort of walk around it and pretend they never see, you know. So that's the problem with Pluto. Now, this is going to start to hit just about the 3rd of February next year. Now, first thing here is that those of you taking notes, please don't be crazy. If nothing is actually going to happen on the 3rd of February. The thing about Pluto conjunct Pluto is that it only happens every 244 years, just about. And right now, there aren't a lot of civilizations in the world that have a history of 244 years. Now, America just happens to be celebrating their anniversary next year. However, in the past, there have been a lot of civilizations like the Roman civilization or even like old dynasties in China that have exceeded the 244. Now, it's up to you to do your own research, but usually Pluto conjunct Pluto, they either kill your civilization or it results in a complete renewal of the civilization. And that's why I keep telling people, don't listen to people who tell you this is unprecedented. Sorry, I unprecedented my food, really. Okay, so it's it signifies death and rebirth, and because it shows up in the 2nd house for values and finances, that's where it's going to happen. Now, this aspect has never occurred in the US history before because this is their first Pluto conjunct Pluto anniversary. So, but the thing is, you see, in February, this is not the only thing that occurs, because one other aspect occurs, and this is called the Saturn sesquiquadrate Venus. It occurs a bit later, 23rd of February. And you'll see that even if some of the cracks start to show up. So those of you reading newspapers somewhere in February, you're going to see a lot of like action happening in Congress really. That if they start to realize the cracks show up, then the control measures will show up very quickly. But a lot of these are half-hearted. They're like, you know, maybe they have measures, but then not everyone agrees. So that's why they're a bit like half-half, right? So it will be passed by Congress. And most of these measures, as you can expect, are designed to prop up businesses and to continue work processes. Nothing very new there. Right? And if there are any developments that are showing up, these measures are supposed to curb the developments that may get out of hand. So if I put all of these into the timeline, what I want you to notice is that things start to ramp up a little bit in the US. Then after that, we have something called Neptune crossing the IC. Now, this red line here highlights something that is known as the IC. very important in country charts because it describes what is at the base and at the foundation. So it describes the regular people, not the rich and not the special, but the regular guys, but also covers things like land, property, and even this concept of our homeland, our patriotism. So whereas Neptune crosses IC, now I don't like Neptune sometimes because it causes confusion and it causes this idealization. People are like not practical. So this starts to ramp up from about 19th of May onwards, and you'll see that there's an idealization that sweeps the United States. Everyone's going to believe in some kind of ideal or another. And as a country, they start to lose their footing. So this can also in some way create things like property or land crisis. So depending on whichever states, USA is a very, very big place. Right? That on top of that, within the exact same month, another thing happens in May when Jupiter also crosses the 4th house. You'll find that there's a lot of increase in activity when it comes to property and land. Suddenly there's this growth of optimism and good times. So rather than it crashing, it's not going to crash. In fact, people are going to be so optimistic, and as it comes with, greed will show up. So we've seen this happen before, happen even in the Earth era. How many times we've seen this happen? So people get greedy and just keep buying and buying and thinking that it will go up forever. And after that, you find that, of course, there will be some people who will sound the alarm. People on the ground, they are going to start to arise, and sometimes it doesn't get too friendly. So that's when people they believe different things and don't stop me from doing stuff, and now they're going to start fighting. Okay, so what's important is this has occurred in US history before. It's happened before. And this actually occurred in 59 to about 1860. So what do we expect to happen? Idealization sweeps the country and they lose their footing. Then their property and land crisis. Now it was a precursor to a major event that happened in the United States known as the American Civil War. So as you can see, the Civil War actually started in 1861. So this Neptune cross IC is not the time of the war itself, but it is the time before the war, right? So I want you all to be able to see the patterns here. Remember critical thinking, huh? Okay, so then what happens in 2022 is that people are a bit crazy lah. Okay, so then from about May onwards, as you can see, all the black stuff is like really converging in like the May-June period. Okay, so people, and the thing is, do you expect to see like outright violence? I don't think so. I have a feeling that people are going to be very optimistic. You are much more likely to see headlines where people are like buying property, or they're saying that America will be great again, something like that lah. So that's what you should expect to see. Now, the fourth thing is when I see that Uranus semi-square Venus, so skip the astrology, this actually shows up from about July. So as you can see, like month on month, things start to ramp higher and higher. And rather than it being an actual problem, the thing is economically, it's wonderful. You should see a sudden kickstart to jobs, production activity. Suddenly no more unemployment, everybody got job, and there's a lot of activity going on. America is great again. And the funny thing is that this kickstart is going to be fueled by a lot of disruption and this idea of fighting an enemy. And you'll find that a lot of the rebels will start to show open opposition. That means if some people have been like kind of underground, they're going to start to become a little bit more obvious about the kind of opposition that they have. Now, this worries me, guys. Last year, in fact, November, we all know what happened in the US, and it's divided, like literally divided 50-50 down the middle. And history is repeating itself in many, many ways. And I want to show you that this particular aspect has actually occurred in their history before. And we don't even have to go as far back as the American Civil War. It actually happened in about 1939 to 1940. Some of you here are history buffs. You know what happened during that period, 39 to 40, but it's not what you think. Right, so again, they had a sudden kickstart to jobs. Suddenly, America was like, wow, activity, then fueled by enemy, right? And it's like you found that the rebels, internal rebels, start to show opposition. Now, if you think that this was the exact war, it wasn't exactly. 1939 was when a lot of countries declared war on Germany. But look then, the United States actually decided to remain neutral, which means that in 1939, they were not involved in the war yet, but they began rearming for war. And this was a strategic decision because they were suffering from the Great Depression. So there was a slump in the economy. And the only way to get things to start moving and to make money again was to start rearming. right? So that was, and I can see in many ways, if something has worked before, then let's do it again, because that's the way to get the economy going. Now, also in 1939, a lot of people forgot about this in American history, but I did my research and I found this. So this picture was taken in 1939. And while we usually, now the history books tell us that America was an enemy of the Nazis, but this was not the case in 1939. There actually quite a lot of people in America were in support of the Nazis. And around that time, this picture is an open parade. And just so you know that the people who supported the Nazis were not exactly like your gutter alley kind of people. There were some pretty high level people who were in support of the Nazis. And they were very openly doing parades and stuff prior to World War II. So yeah, you go figure. Okay, so that means if I were to put all of that, there are a few other small indicators. I'm just going to pop through them. Right, by October, you find that there's open fighting against an authority. Fighting doesn't mean they actually shoot guns at each other. Sometimes people fight on social media, yeah. And there's another one, the Grand Cross starts ramping up from about December onwards, and you find that the financial markets will start to react around that time. Now, does this necessarily mean that they will crash? I'm not sure. Sometimes financial markets, they're very unpredictable when it comes to war, right? And there are times when the markets don't correlate to real value, right? And of course, activity will occur in a lot of these material possessions. Now, this doesn't mean it's going up or down. It simply means that there are a lot of changes in how people relate to money and the things that they own. And it might trigger some fighting in like certain areas in the US. So if I were to pile everything up together, you don't really need to know like each of those astrological things, but those of you who have been on my webinars before, you know that those color bars, they're pretty potent, yeah? If it shows up on May's color bars, it happens, yeah? So the thing is, and it all starts to sort of converge around from about May onwards. Now, I want everyone to be really, really clear that even just now when I showed you the American Civil War thing, right, it's like it goes on for a long time. So that means I don't want anyone to think that it's going to be one event, one day, or like on this day, this thing happened. Not really. Like a lot of the things that actually affect people come after, and they play out over a period of years. And the other thing that you also want to be quite clear about is that just because something happens in the US does not mean that the world immediately reacts. Okay, am I making sense? So, for example, the subprime mortgage crisis in the US actually started occurring about 2007 already. It was as early as that. But by the time it starts to hit everybody in Asia, it was like a couple of years later. So guys, don't be lame. And it's not about, I want to caution against the people who have been using my webinars to invest or to think that you want to short the stock market or whatever it is. Do that on your own risk, and please go and do your own research, right? Do not base your investment decisions on May Sim's predictions. It is not for that purpose that I do my public webinars for people, okay? So what I want to draw your attention to is that in America, that I see American Civil War indicators, loud and clear. I also see financial crisis indicators, again, loud and clear. Now, America is also recovering from the effects of COVID. They have not solved their COVID problem yet, and the economic problems are still there. So when I put all of these things together, I'm not expecting America to have an easy time from here onwards, right? And it's not the first civilization to hit their 244th year mark and run into something like this, right? It has happened before, it will happen again. So this is but where I want the average person who is not an American to think about is, remember what I said about the CLOs and any other investment that's out there that is dependent on this idea that if only some default, we are fine. But it cannot be everything all default one. And this is where I really invite you to consider, is it possible? Just consider, is there a possibility that the scenario on the right-hand side can actually happen? Is it possible? Just consider that, and to be very aware that it does form a very large percentage of what we consider paper and money assets in the entire world, not just in the US. Okay, so now on paper, the world looks okay now. If you actually pay a lot of attention to the reports that are being put out across the world, I mean, we also see that now this one, I just decided to use this headline, but I want to be very clear. Okay, this is not about Singapore. I'm just simply using this, and Singapore is a great example because our ratings are still at AAA. Okay, so that means And from what I can see, I don't think very many countries are AAA, and we are really at the top of the game right now, okay? But the real purpose of showing you this slide is something that Fitch has put as a disclaimer, which I think has a lot of wisdom in it, and I want to draw your attention to it. Because as you look at ratings, people have to understand that when you look at information, are there factors that can change how information is being interpreted? Of course, right? So if, for example, if a country or an investment or any kind of organization is rated highly, but factors that could individually or collectively lead to negative ratings or downgrades include two things. Number one, a macroeconomic issue that can cause a prolonged and a severe shock, and is likely well beyond the impact of coronavirus. So which means, like I said, if you've got COVID obsession, get your brain off COVID obsession, that there are problems way bigger than COVID. And it causes a substantial worsening of sovereign balance sheets across the world. And also, what if it's a structural issue, which could be a severe banking system crisis that has a major spillover effect on the economy? So this is why it brings me, logically speaking, that as we look at post-COVID, the countries will take care of COVID, whether it's vaccines or the disease disappear, who cares, right? At some point, COVID will pass. But what we want to pay attention to is what are the major things that will happen after COVID. And the first one, obviously, is an economic or financial upset. Now, the second is a human or social unrest. Okay, and why I'm taking this particular webinar so seriously, and I really hope that people have listened and you are sharing this on social media with your community, because people need to hear this, right? It is like we're going to be seeing things that we've not seen in our lifetime before, and wouldn't you want people in your life to be prepared for this, right? Please tell them, okay? And so what worries me very much is this time around, I prepared very heavily for this webinar. I didn't just look at Singapore and the US, I looked at several countries. And I want to tell you that my webinar is only 3 hours. I can't do every country in the world, but I am showing you just a smattering, a small portion of some of the indicators that I see in the countries that I think are going to affect us in this part of the world. And if you are actively looking at the papers, there are also many other countries that are facing big challenges right now. Things like places like Japan. The Olympics is going on in July. I'm not really sure how they're going to do that, but Japan is in trouble now. Okay, so I didn't do Japan, but I'm just asking you to please don't just depend on my webinar. There's a lot of information out there, and you need to be looking for it. Okay, so let's go first to the UK, and like I said, you know, there's a lot of other things that's happening in the UK. I need you to understand that what I show on the color bars here is not complete. Right, so there are other things which I have not covered because practically speaking, we can't be here for 2 weeks, yeah? Okay, so there are a few patterns that I'd like to introduce you to first and foremost. Now, the UK has a placement in their chart that describes their people as having a predilection to sort of looking at money in a very unusual kind of way. They are not always practical when it comes to looking at money, and sometimes things tend to change very abruptly in the United Kingdom. So in 2022, something happens, and this blue planet that I've just circled is Uranus, and it's known as a chaos planet. So whenever Uranus shows up, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it allows people to break out from restriction and very conventional kind of thinking. So that means they are willing to accept new technology, for example, or like a new perspective, that kind of stuff. Now, when it shows up in the 8th house, some of you watching this know a bit of astrology, and the 8th house can mean a wide variety of things, ranging all the way from deaths to psychology, to sex, to investments, to insurance, and that kind of thing. And also international trade. When we look at a country's chart, sometimes when we look at monies that have been put here, put there, and I think in many ways, when we think of like currencies, for example, that a long time ago, it used to be that the currency sort of showed the value of your country, but sometimes it's the relative value of your country and another country, if you know what I'm talking about. So now what happens is that when Uranus put itself in this position, it created this pattern in the chart, and we call this a Thor's hammer. So for those of you who like to watch Marvel comics and the Thor's hammer, that weapon, that's the one we're talking about. Now, in Western astrology, when a Thor's hammer shows up in charts in this way, it is associated with what officially is known as wayward behavior. So which means people don't follow rules, and they tend to be, for lack of a better word, a bit naughty lah. Okay, basically, people are, for those of you who speak Hokkien, there's a bit of that guai-lan-ness that shows up among people. Now, and this Thor's hammer occurs just about May. And as I show you a few countries, you're going to see a lot of these periods of time next year where things really ramp up around the world. Now, it's going to trigger a rebellion about, and the topic has to revolve around money or currency or investments within the UK. And this is also it's very modern. It's very untraditional. Like, people are not going to go with what has always been the case. And I understand that as I'm speaking, a lot of people are making assumptions now. You think you know what I'm talking about, but just suspend your thing first, because I see patterns that may not be what you think it is. Now, this particular aspect has a history of bringing a lot of abrupt changes to UK's financial situation. So I've realized in their history that every time this thing shows up, things happen to their money. Every time, okay? And the last time this occurred was in 38 and 39, before the UK declared war on Germany. Now, before you start to get your underwear in a bind, right? I don't actually see indicators of the UK declaring war on anybody anytime soon, right? So I don't see it, and I don't see that the pattern is not exactly the same as in 38 and 39, but it will bring abrupt changes to their money. Now, the other thing that's occurring around the same time is this Jupiter in the 6th. And you know, before I go on, right? I mean, even if you don't know astrology, and you look at that combo that's up there, right? It looks like a gigantic red arrow, if you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes astrology is a fantastic language, and sometimes it just literally like points you to the right direction, you know? And whereas as Jupiter is crossing the descendant, and again, this happens also in May 2020, we're going to see an emergence of new players, new partners. There could be new agreements. So some of you may be following international news very closely, as you all probably know that Brexit has happened. I'm not sure whether it's already happened. It depends on what you read lah. But the point being that the UK is probably going to make some new changes, contracts. You need to go and do your research and decide how this fits in with the pointers that I'm showing you here. But also take note that around this time, you should also expect a new growth in leadership. So what does growth in leadership mean? Because astrology doesn't actually tell me Boris Johnson or whoever. It doesn't name people. So when we look at growth, it could be new leaders emerge. It could also be that we start to have bigger demands on the leaders. So these are the possibilities. But it also has a very strong rebellious streak. So if leaders should show up around this time, it could be that it's not what people expect. And the leaders may not be following the traditional path. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you here. So I put it on the timeline. And as you can see, everything ramps up from about May. But I also want to draw your attention to that black spot that I see there. Now, I didn't cover this in the previous slide. Saturn, and it's a typo there, is a Saturn semi-square sun. So it should be SMQ instead of SSQ. But as you can see, you know, it's happening around the same time. Now, traditionally in astrology, when I see a placement like that, it's there are changes to leadership. So again, it echoes what I said earlier. But as some of you may know that the UK, the sun sign, the sun is in Capricorn. So it describes a very put together, very classy kind of leader. And anyone who has seen a picture of Boris Johnson knows that I wouldn't describe him as classy and put together. He's a bit messy. So the thing is, it doesn't fit. So as an astrologer, I know that this leader that they're talking about, this traditional put together leader, is probably not Boris Johnson. And so I thought about this, and I'm very careful with what I'm about to say next, okay? Because it's not astrological. That means I'm simply putting the pieces together, and I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, how would this work? And so sometimes astrology is very literal. So there's going to be changes to money. People are going to be rebellious about money, and it's something to do with a traditional leader. What I thought about was this, that I actually went on Google and I typed the UK, the English pound. And this picture came up. And what struck me was that, well, you know, her picture is on every one of those notes and coins. And I think she would fit the category of a traditional and a put together leader. This woman has led the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth for more than 60 over years. And that's her. And she's 95 this year-ish, 95. She just lost the love of her life, and she has a grandson right now who is being extremely naughty, driving her to a place that she might not want to go yet. But the point being that the chart, I want to be absolutely clear here, is that the chart does not specifically say anything that's going to happen to her. It doesn't. But I'm also saying that when you look at the facts here, that if at some point they have to remove her from the notes, and I'm suggesting here that people might change their attitude about the English pound. And so the thing is, now on top of that, there are a few other things that are pointing to this as well. Now, Uranus in that house doesn't just create the Thor's hammer; it also creates something called a T-square. So this T-square starts to ramp up around July, and the interpretation here is that there's sudden exposure to financial vulnerability, that the pound is going to be exposed, and that it would be triggered by some kind of development that involves investments, banking, or currency. And especially when it's linked to other economies. Now, at this point, I want to remember that in 1857, the panic in the United States also spread to the UK, and the indicators are strikingly similar, okay? And the next is that you find that people start to develop a very rebellious attitude towards monies. Okay, so that's yeah. And on top of that, Saturn has come to join in the game. And unfortunately, when it joined the game, it forms like a cross, this grand cross. And although this would have started as early as February next year, but it starts to ramp up. The black color portion starts to ramp up around September to November. And what I see here is that if there is a new creation in the UK, if they start to come up with a new form of money or a new form of whatever, this new creation hits a snag. Basically, people may not support this completely. That is against a public that is conservative or skeptical, and they just don't trust it. So this idealistic money, it doesn't come to pass. So it's supposed to lift off, but the aeroplane doesn't get off the ground. So, and the loss of value can be very huge, because something like this, not exactly the same, but something like this has happened in the UK history before, because historically, this occurred in 1992. It's not very long ago. 1992, there's something called Black Wednesday. So those of you who are familiar with finances and stuff, George Soros made a lot of money with that one. But I want to caution everybody, and those of you who don't know what Black Wednesday is, never mind, go and do your research, but this picture says it all, right? So basically the pound goes under, people are complaining that they've been screwed over by the cabinet. I suspect this time around, they're going to say that they were screwed over by the constitution, okay? So the point is that I want to make really, really clear, okay? The last time when George Soros made a fortune with Black Wednesday, right? You need to know that it wasn't the end of the Earth era, okay? This time around, it's happening again, but this is the end of the Earth era, so don't be lame and don't be stupid, okay? You are not going to get a George Soros outcome out of this. I repeat, you are not going to get a George Soros outcome out of this, right? So so this actually happened, and what I want people to understand is that when I put all of that together, again, I see that things start to ramp up. For them, it would be about that July, August, September kind of period. Okay, so that what this tells you is that we are already looking at two of the world's major superpowers. Around the same time, you'll find that what happens in the US starts to have a bit of a similar patterns in the UK. Okay, so that means if you're looking for the ground to shake, it starts to happen around that time. Okay, and the pound is a major currency in the world. So, as I said, it's not just an economic or a financial upset that is going to affect all of us. So, in fact, the other thing is the social and the human unrest. And I'm not suggesting that the problem in the UK is just purely financial, right? So, those of you who understand what I'm getting at, understand that the UK may not be a very stable place during that time. So now this brings me to our neighbors, Malaysia. And I know quite a lot of you who are logging in right now are watching from Malaysia. So, of course, one of the biggest concerns that is plaguing the average Malaysian right now is that, okay, COVID, right? It's like the numbers are high and it's preventing a lot of people from moving on with their life. So as I did with Singapore, let's deal with COVID first, right? Because COVID obsession, right? Let's clear it so that we can get our brains clear to see what else is going on. So in Malaysia, just as in Singapore, they also have Chiron, which is that pain indicator. Now in Singapore, it's in the 6th house. So every time Chiron gonna hit, right, we get a health problem. Now with Malaysia, it's very different. Now if you actually look at the Malaysian chart, you see that their Chiron is in the 3rd house, number 3. And when it's in number 3, the indicators are not health. It is not health. In fact, the 3rd house governs things like communication. It governs things like moving around. So in fact, as an illustration, earlier this year, in January to February, just a few months ago, we had Mercury conjunct Chiron. So when that Chiron gets hit, you'll find that things like communication and movement gets affected. And I've always been a little bit amused, pardon my astrological amusement, but I've always been quite amused by the fact that Singapore calls our lockdowns circuit breaker, while the Malaysians call theirs movement control order, right? So that I thought was very interesting. But in any case, it's in January, you found that it was a minor trigger to pain to movement, which means people were not allowed to move around. And also that there were constant changes in messaging. So I've not followed this completely, but the impression I got at the time was that the different states had there was a different messaging at the time, which might have been quite confusing to people on the ground because the rules weren't the same. So this was one of the problems. And the second is that right now, can you see from 29 April to June, which is now, but 18 June was yesterday. So if this is accurate, it might mean that at least some of the movement control in Malaysia is going to start easing up from today onwards. So what we saw is this was a heavy trigger to pain to movement. So people were not allowed to move anywhere at all. And so that means during the stationing period, which was in May and June, there is a complete standstill, which some people know this as a total complete lockdown for MCO. So it's although it doesn't indicate COVID, but if you look at this graph of the COVID cases that were happening in Malaysia, they seem to correspond, right? So that means when Mercury was involved, then COVID case went up, and Saturn was involved, it went up. So if I put it all on the timeline, okay, so for those of you who live in Malaysia, or if you are Singaporean or anyone else that does business with Malaysia, you're very interested in this. So as you can see, the black area, April, May, June, which is now, was bad. And it really was bad in Malaysia. But afterwards, you notice it's red color, which means it's not exactly great and the problem doesn't disappear, but it's not black, which means it's not at its peak. Okay, so it starts to decline a little bit. And similarly to Singapore, ours ends about February, but for Malaysia, it ends just about January. Right, so COVID does run its course in that sense. But of course, a lot of you are looking at the right-hand side of the table and it's like, hey, but then I see another color bar there. What does it mean? So I want to re-emphasize here that for Malaysia, when Chiron gets hit, it's not always, the problem is not an illness. The problem is always moving around and there is a messaging problem. So that means the messages that people receive are not clear. And sometimes the problem comes not from COVID, but from the fact that they don't understand what's going on. Okay, so this is important for me to re-emphasize because I'm not suggesting that COVID hits Malaysia in May. I'm not suggesting this. In fact, there are other indicators that hint to me that it could be something a little bit different. So what I see here is Neptune opposite Mercury, and this starts occurring, you can see for yourself, that there's confusion on the ground. There's a lot of misunderstanding. And it comes from the spirituality of the masses. So that means if the people have very strong beliefs, and that's where the intention is coming from. And because it cuts across from top to bottom, it will cause a lot of disagreement between the ordinary people and the leaders. For those of you who know a bit of astrology, when you see that there's Pisces at the bottom and Virgo at the top, it means that the leaders are trying to come up with a practical solution, while the people on the ground are a little bit more imaginative. Okay, so that's the best way I can explain it. Now, on top of that, more things are happening. Neptune trines Moon happens in May. And you'll find that the spirituality and the compassion for people who are disadvantaged will become heightened around that time. So Neptune tri-moon brings sensitivity to people. And so they are extremely sensitive, they are not logical. And on top of that, most of the issues that will come up will involve things like spirituality, beliefs, or ethics. Now, this is not a pattern that has not shown up in Malaysia before. And in case that wasn't enough, there is a third aspect that happens at the same time. In fact, it begins on the same day. But guys, again, please don't be lame. It's like it may not be something happen on 19th of May, but that the pattern begins around the same time. Okay, so let's be clear here. So as you get Saturn square moon, the effect on the ground is that people are going to be very sensitive to specifically words and messages. So what I anticipate happening in Malaysia next year is that people do have to be extremely careful about what is said, and sometimes an interpretation of what is not said. And therefore, people might feel very easily that they are unsupported or that they are restricted in some way. So this is extremely important, and especially for those of you who live in Malaysia, and if we do business with Malaysia, please prepare, right? Make sure that your messaging has to be absolutely clear, unambiguous, because let's not add to a potential situation that could occur in Malaysia. They're going to be a bit stressed up there. So if I were to put all of this out in a timeline, you're going to start to see some similarities. The US, the UK, Malaysia, around the same time, things ramp up. And it's not just a financial unrest. I know everybody is waiting to see whether the market's going to crash or anything like that. But if you are paying close attention to what I've been saying so far, I suspect that the finances are not necessarily the biggest problem that the world is going to face. Because from what I see in Malaysia, I'm not saying that the markets and money isn't going to be affected, but what I do see, it's more like it's a reaction, a human reaction to what is happening in the world. Okay, so I want to move on to Hong Kong, and there are some specific things that I want to mention here. So if you can see, Saturn is, so I'm just going to click through this, and it starts to ramp up around February. So theirs is a bit early, and you see that there is a restriction of freedom. Now I'm going to be very careful about this, but I don't think anyone's going to be surprised at what I'm going to show here, okay? First of all, by February, you find that there is a theme, people are restricted. And this could come from the fact that there are agreements, there are contracts that are binding, and people may not have the freedom of expression and identity during that period of time. It doesn't mean that it is like happens on the 23rd of February, but I think the discussions begin. And on top of that, Uranus. Now, Uranus, the chaos planet, again showing up in the 8th house. And this time around in Hong Kong, it actually forms, again, a Thor's hammer. So for those of you who forgot, right, the Thor's hammer tends to create wayward behavior and also people who are going to be a bit naughty. Okay, so then this ramps up in July. You will see that there could be rise of the oppressed, people who feel that they need to have a say in who they are. And rebellious behavior is going to be on the rise. And just as it happened in the UK, it's not just that pattern. You see that gigantic red triangle shows up, the gigantic red arrow shows up again. And this one means starts happening from about May. Demands in negotiations start to increase. So if the negotiation begins in February, just about May is when the demands will increase. People may not be so kind to each other. And it's coming from a space that people are insistent and to maintain their right for self-expression. So that's going to create a tense situation. Even if you don't know astrology, you look at that combi there, you get a feel for it. And this starts to come to a head somewhere in about August, between August to October, where there could be an announcement of a new chapter in Hong Kong's history and potentially a new identity. So how this is going to play out, I want to be absolutely clear that astrology doesn't specifically say whether outcomes go one way or another. That's not what astrology is for. But rather, we can actually see the patterns of what is occurring at the time. So if you live in Hong Kong, if you have strong ties to Hong Kong, it's going to be a bit of an exciting period next year. And so this time I sort of jumble up the chronology a bit, but what I want you to notice is that most of the action and the activity shows up in August, September, and October. Although you will start to see the ripples and the tremors start to show up in Hong Kong as early as February. Okay, so now this brings me to, again, I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough, that please stop your COVID obsession, right? Basically, that one is not the big problem. There are way bigger issues. And which is why, and I want you to sort of realize that these two things are actually interconnected. You understand what I'm talking about? That humans make up the market and market makes up the humans. And therefore, we need to see this as a holistic situation here. And of course, this brings me to Singapore 2022. Now at this point, which I will cover after the break. Okay, so I'll come back to Singapore after the break. I'm going, right now it's about 11:20. As you can see, I give a lot of information and it's very condensed. So please stick with me, okay? I know this is tough and some people are like, wow, she says so fast, I cannot write fast enough. Don't worry, there will be replays. So before any of you start texting my team and is there going to be a replay? Yes, there will be. It is going to be uploaded the same as all my other webinars. But like I said, if you've got friends who want to get this information in a timely and crucial manner, please share the link with them. And for those of you who haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. You can either scan the QR code, go there. And I think my team is also going to post on the group chats in Zoom and in Facebook Live how you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook or whatever channel that you prefer. Because from time to time, I do post updates. Okay, so and you get notifications when this webinar will be uploaded. So please go and subscribe so that you get the notification. Plus, the people who want to know more about what era, whatever, you can just go there and watch the videos in your own time. Okay, so the timeline is about 11:20-ish. I will resume at 11:30 and this will be the only break for the webinar. I'll see you guys at 11:30. Okay, we are back, and some people say the breaks are short, but you know, it's just enough for you to go get some water and take a breath, go to the loo, because we have so much more else to cover. Now, the thing is, as so many things are happening in the world, surely you're not in a place where you think that that things are necessarily going to be like super peaceful in Singapore. Okay, so that's the point you got to be prepared for. Now, the thing is, 5 months ago, when I did my last webinar in January, I hinted that there would be very major developments in June 2021 in Singapore that will have long-term effects. Now, at the time, I'm very sure everybody assumed COVID. You know why? Because everybody has COVID obsession. And here's the thing, it's not COVID that I was talking about. So some of you those of you who have seen my January webinars, whether live or on YouTube, will remember this slide that I presented in the previous webinar. I talked about Neptune square Jupiter, that it would happen by about 30th of May, which is like 20 days ago, and that it would be at its peak at around 30th May to the 23rd of July. And what I described at the time was that you should expect that there's some kind of unclarity, uncertainty, that it would change the way people work, that they would change our processes, and that it would also affect our foreign relationships. And at this point, I need to clarify that it is foreign relationships of all sorts, whether is it outside of Singapore, as Singapore does our negotiation with other countries and our trade and that kind of stuff, and also foreigners that are within Singapore. Okay, so this the astrological chart doesn't necessarily differentiate between these two. And also that Singapore might have some kind of idealism about foreign projects. And this idealism doesn't always mean like, wow, we love it, but it could also be this kind of idealism could also be that we're not sure what's going to happen internationally. But at the same time, just about now, okay, so again, between May and July, which is like now, okay, we should expect that there are international discussions and ideas that sound grandiose, very grand, and it sounds logical, like, okay, this is the solution to the problem, right? But has major wide-ranging implications, at least for Singapore. So I have to confess that at the time, in January, it's not like I know what's happening in the international space, but I have to confess at the time, I thought it was going to be the World Economic Forum that was slated to be held in Singapore at the same time. So the reason was because when I put it on the timeline, that's what I saw. And that seemed to be a logical thing. But for those of you who have been reading the papers and you kind of know which one to click on, if I were you, the not so important one is like where got cluster, or like that one may not have long-term implications. Now click on the right ones that have long-term implications, such as about 4 days ago, this is the headline, what the G7's global tax reform plan could mean for Singapore. And for the people who may not understand what this is about, there's a bunch of countries coming together to make some decisions about taxation, on the understanding that for sometimes companies kind of get away with going to like cheap countries, where the tax is good and that kind of stuff. Now, this is really important to Singapore because we're called a tax haven for many reasons. And companies love doing business in Singapore because of a very conducive business environment, which includes taxation. So of course, logically speaking, there are probably much more reasons for doing business in Singapore than just tax. And this has been brought up. Okay, so, but the thing here is, what I'm explaining to everyone here is that COVID can pass, but this one is going to absolutely change the way we work with other countries and with the businesses, many of them MNCs and foreign businesses that are here and have an agreement with our country and with our people. So again, critical thinking, you have to go and think about that yourself. So as now that I've shown you, in fact, for the rest of 2021, if you want to know like what's going on, I kind of told you early on in today's session already, that there's going to be stuff happening in October. And I think one of the main focus is pretty much COVID obsession now, which is like we just want to get COVID out of our system. So that's, if you read newspapers, it's going to be pretty much dominated by COVID news, more or less until the end of the year. Okay, so that means if you're going to expect like wow, waves in 2021, not really. And in fact, in most of the countries, you're not going to see major waves anyway, most of the countries. But just like everybody else, our action begins in 2022. So one of the first things that I'm going to point out, again, this is not a complete timeline. I'm essentially picking out the things that I think are going to be relevant to you. So first of all, Pluto quincunx Mercury. First time in this presentation, you see like the green lines. But this starts to occur about the early part of February. Now we're going to start to see that when Pluto is in the 4th house, you start to see like the cracks on the ground. Like, so that means we start to see potential threats. And when I say threats, please don't worry, okay? I'm not talking about like World War III or nothing like that, okay? But you're going to start to see a lot of rumors, discussions, and a bit of the early news. Like some people will leak information here and there, but just talking about it. And it all involves things like transformations to the concept of home base. So for example, some companies may start to decide that they don't need such a big office, or that they don't need an office in a specific country, that kind of thing. And also, I think that Singapore is going to start to make some decisions about our home base. So that means when we look at what's on the ground, the kind of properties and land and how it's being used. And also, you'll find that there could be some changes to long-term plans. That means what plan had been in place now has to change because of the climate changing. And some people may also describe, when I say long-term plans, it could also be that they start to talk about from here onwards what we are going to do. And if I were you, and you have a critical thinking cap on, please pay attention to a lot of the news reports that come out around that time. And they may say that, oh, we thought about it for a very long time, which could well be the case. That means most of the plans that are being put on the news around February are not going to be brand new plans. That means these companies may have been considering this for a long time, possibly way before COVID, okay? So at the time, you'll find that people on the ground may not believe it completely. They're like, yeah, this won't happen. It's like, that's classic response, okay? And later on, we have an SP project that starts from about March, 1 month later. And then you find that any kind of threats to our foundation that has not been addressed, they start to become a bit more obvious already. And this will deal with the concept of the elite or the wealthy. Now, when I say this, right, please don't go and think that it's always like some rich guy somewhere. In fact, the concept of the elite and wealthy can also refer to organizations that are far-reaching with a lot of resources, and those guys are kind of important to Singapore, okay? And this can also involve some of these departures or endings, mainly because a lot of these planets have a lot of ties to the number 12 house right at the end. So it's possible that we may see departures, and it doesn't mean that companies depart. So again, I want people to really broaden your mind and don't just focus on one thing. It's not just companies who may depart. We may also see individuals depart. And endings can also include things like, for example, certain projects that are not going ahead. There could be also certain products or services that were being done a certain way, and then we've decided that, okay, from now on, we are going to discontinue certain products or services. These are all possibilities. And I'm not being vague here. It just means that in every industry, the concept of a departure or ending can actually occur differently. So as you are listening to this, it really depends on where you are in your industry and in your life, right? But you should expect that a lot of the changes start to show up around March. And of course, it means that people will need to come face to face with the truth. So whatever rumors started coming out about a month ago, they start to become a bit more official around this time. But having said that, no, like I said, for a lot of these long range things, right, don't expect that the moment and like an announcement come out, that straight away the world goes crazy. It will not be like this. So most likely everyone's going to be quite calm, and it honestly will take a long time for us to see what the full impact is going to be. That means it's like, don't worry, buildings aren't going to collapse overnight. Okay, so everyone needs to get your brain working. Yeah, it's not going to happen that way. So when I put it on the timeline, right, so you start to see that yes, the rumors come out around February, but the black section is between March to about June. So that's it's quite a long period of time, about 3 months, and that's why the announcements or plans will play out a little bit. And it's possible that some people may retract, or some people may say we're going to do this, and then after that, we change our minds. Those are absolutely possible. So as a person operating on the ground, you just need to be prepared that the situation will change quite quickly during those 4 months. But then again, I want to be clear that I don't think anyone is very, very surprised to hear this, right? So that means you shouldn't be like, oh my God, okay, so you should be calm and to really think through what needs to be done. But for the people who are worried that, oh my God, like, are we going to bankrupt or are we going to die? First thing I'll tell you here is indicators suggest that Singapore adapts very quickly to solve the money problem. And at this point, I really want to emphasize that for whatever other conclusions that you may come to, I want to emphasize that from all the calculations that I'm doing and all the research that I'm doing, it is true that we honestly have pretty much the best government in the world in many, many, many ways, right? And I want to emphasize that whatever else I'm going to show you here, it's the truth is the government does do the right thing. And straight away, first thing you'll see here is that we also, just like Hong Kong and just like the UK, we also have the Uranus in our 8th house. Now, the difference is, unlike the rest of them, ours comes out as a positive outcome. So when this will start to show up around May next year, and of course, you know, if we start to see people announcing their plans in like February, March, then of course people are going to start to worry a bit, and the solutions come quickly. By May, you see our quick reaction will bring in a lot of elite investments. So that means even if there are big players leaving, it seems that there are big players coming in. That's what the chart says. And these are going to be highly charming, very attractive. And you'll find that a lot of these guys are going to be in very new and exciting industries. So this actually is fantastic news for Singapore. It goes to show how much the leaders have planned in advance, which may not be the case in other countries. And I don't know if you've been following the news, but from what I have seen here and there, I recall some of the announcements that were made last year, like when people were still panicking about COVID and how it was going to affect us. And people are asking about how about our trade and what if we start losing these people. And I recall multiple of our ministers who actually announced that they are already in talks with some big players who can come in and to solve the problem. Okay, so I absolutely see this happening from May onwards. So however, we also have to be logical here, because you know that around in May 2022, lots of things are happening in other countries. And we've already seen that there has to be changes to taxation and reforms. And what this means is, let's be very practical here, okay? If you want people to come and do business in your country, wouldn't it make sense, guys, that you kind of do need to sweeten the package, right? You do need to make concessions that will make it favorable and feasible for people to want to come and choose to do business here. So which means that we might need to logically make a lot of changes to things like our money system, our taxation, investment system, because otherwise, how are you going to attract those who have resources? Okay, so, and please keep in mind that the global climate is volatile during that period. And of course, for the leaders to do their job right, it makes sense, right, that there has to be massive changes that will affect all of us, logically speaking. So, but on top of that, what I also see is that the reaction, however, like not everybody is like logical and think straight, yeah? So the reaction on the ground may not be as stable as what we think it might be, because we also have a Thor's hammer. So that means we're expecting some wayward behavior. People are going to be naughty. There's a bit of that guailaness going on. Having said that, our Thor's hammer is not the same as the Thor's hammer that occurs in the UK, and it's not the same as the one that happens in Hong Kong. It is quite different. And in fact, this Thor's hammer here starts also from about May. So just about the time the changes start to show up, then you find the guailaness shows up around the same time. There will be high levels of discontent. I don't think it's surprising to the rest of you. And it will also address a lot of frustration with what is being seen as policies that are purely just logical, but may not take into consideration many other factors. Or this at least is the perception from the workers in Singapore. Now, there's going to be some disagreement with the views of the leaders, especially with regard to what I call the realities of money. So that means, is it that the country is going to be okay as we bring in some of these other investments? But I think the issue that I see from the chart here seems to be that whether or not in reality that this money is going to play out the way that it is described. So of course, I mean, I want to say very clearly, okay, that in Singapore's chart, for those of you who do know astrology, you can take a glance at the chart and you see that we have Jupiter in the 9th house. What I think here is, do I honestly think that people are going to riot in the streets? This doesn't describe it. It looks more like keyboard warriors. Okay, so you're going to see angry, social media angry, that kind of thing, right? It's not going to be violent, okay? So the silver lining here is that Jupiter in the 6th means there's improvements in health. So if you're worried that, that we're going to get another wave of COVID, it doesn't look like it. Okay, it doesn't look like it. And even if it's there, I don't think it's going to be a major problem. Okay? So if I put all this into a timeline, then yeah, you can see that as the announcements come and the reactions, the control measures start to show up, people will react. Okay, so you can see, yeah, that shows up there. Now, as with other countries, do things heat up in the second half? Yes, of course they do. But Singapore is going to be, comparatively speaking, not as bad as the rest. Okay, so of course Uranus doesn't just do what I showed you just now, but it also forms a T-square. So when we see T-squares, there is like a tension aspect. So towards the end of May, the tension is probably at its highest, and we are going to see disruptions. So basically, a lot of the rules are going to show up. The new rules will show up very quickly. And I don't think it's meant to be, it's not meant to disrupt, but rather it's a requirement for fast reaction. And why do you think I'm making such a big fuss and asking you to get as many people to watch this webinar as possible? Because they need to prepare, right? And so a lot of these disruptions will show up in things like the usual stuff, taxes, investments, banks, possibly currency. And it might be, frankly, necessary, okay? And also, that the unfortunate thing is that it's going to uncover a lot of the vulnerabilities. So this is something that I mentioned when I look at the UK chart as well. That means if there are problems with a financial system that already exists prior to all of these changes, then you find that the changes may reveal and expose some of the like false or misleading impressions. So that's the pattern that the chart explains to me. And of course, during this period, you find that there's going to be a lot, like a high rise in nationalism. People are going to be very proud of the fact that we are Singaporeans. And given this tension, I suspect the tension can be at its highest around that May-June period, just like the rest of the world. But what I see here, the chart suggests that the leaders are going to push through anyway. Not the first time we've seen this. Okay, so that there are, despite the objections, you'll find that sometimes leaders have to make unpopular decisions. Okay, so there are also other factors that show up. I just want to quickly run through this Mars in the 9th house. There is a Mars retrograde that occurs worldwide. It's just that it happens in other countries too, just that I'm going to focus on Singapore because I suspect this Mars retrograde will affect us a little bit more than it does in other countries. So this starts to happen from about September. So keep in mind that a lot of the changes happen in May, but in September, some things get put into action. I think it is the execution of the plans that are announced in May. So there are going to be delays, disruptions, interruptions nationwide. So what this means is, of course, I'm assuming here that if you are a business owner or if you are a freelancer or even just an employee in a big organization, there's a lot of work to be done. And therefore, adjustments will be there and a lot of our work processes could be disrupted. Just a bit similar, is a slightly similar pattern to what we saw last year when the circuit breaker showed up. So those of you who, basically last year's circuit breaker is a bit of a dress rehearsal. Okay, so basically this one is going to hit us a little bit more messy like than compared to last year. So disruptions, and you'll find that a lot of these, the rules are going to change. Just like last year, you found that all the rules changed, right? So it's going to happen again next year. And a lot of these are going to involve things like the regulations. Singapore law consequentially needs to adjust to some of these new changes. And it will also change the way we report things. So whether a lot of information. Now, what I see from the chart, okay, so this is very literal. The chart actually suggests that there is hidden money that is going to be addressed by this placement. Okay, so I know a lot of people are very imaginative and you think that, you know, they're going to go after some of these people who never pay money. But I want to tell you something, okay, this is not specific to rich people. That means I'm also suggesting that the people in general might have a pattern of what I call hidden money. And I'm just going to suggest what I think it is. I'm not sure, but you decide, okay? My suggestion here is that quite a lot of people, at least in the last 1 to 2 years, have found ways to make money that is not on paper, right? So that means if you are not paying taxes, if you are not accounting for certain income, I think Singapore is quite good at unearthing the people who have hidden money. Okay, so I'm just saying, okay, so that means if for the people who do business, please do your preparations. Don't say Mason did not warn you, okay? So will it temporarily, at least between September to March? Because I want you to look at that time period, and it's about 6 months, okay? And that makes sense, because if there are going to be major changes to our systems, 6 months are considered very fast really. Some countries take years to transit. Singapore very efficient, okay? So is it going to affect our day-to-day operations and our jobs? Like, of course lah, right? So you just have to understand that our operations are going to be disrupted just about that time. Okay, fair, right? So the whole point of this whole exercise is that it's going to bring the balance back to our administration, which tells you that somewhere in the middle of the year, there is going to be imbalance. And that's why there has to be action taken to bring that balance back. Now, so if I were to put all of it into the timeline that, yes, Singapore is undergoing quite a lot of changes next year. And you can grab that if you like. Like I said, replay is going to be up there. But having said that, do I see that it's going to be a disaster, that it's going to be badly managed? The truth is, I've mined this data. Trust me, guys, I'm Singaporean, I've mined it. And it's not as disruptive as some people might consider it to be. And this is why I come to the conclusion that we really do, in the case of like extreme crisis in the world, we really do have the best government in the world. Okay, so the reality is it's just not going to be the same as other situations. So I want, just in case there's ambiguity, let me be absolutely clear that in 2022, I do not see a collapse. And on paper, Singapore is still going to remain pretty wealthy and to a large extent, pretty stable beyond people complaining on the internet, right? So now at this point, I know that some people are now wondering like, walao, it's like, you know, here she can't tell us until it's like, it's some major thing. And then now she's telling us that, you know, comparatively speaking, is it going to be peaceful in Singapore? No, it's not. It's not going to be peaceful. You're going to be super busy. But compared to other countries, right, it's going to be in stark comparison that you're going to feel really lucky that you're here. But you see, the bigger point that I want to make here is this, and this is my real message in this webinar, that often the problem with COVID that I found is that people have become very short-sighted. If you look at some of the webinars that I've done, and a lot of these predictions are very short-term. They are like few months, maybe up to a year. But the thing is, have you noticed that a lot of your long-term plans are out of the window? People are just planning for next month. They're just planning for, hey, wait for news and see like we have to change. What has disappeared from human consciousness is what I call a long-term plan. And you have to ask yourself whether this has been the case. So what I'm explaining here is that people have become extremely short-sighted. And the thing is, I know Singapore is an island. And you know, people say no man is an island. I know Singapore is. But you see, the thing about being an island is that we've been protected and we've been very lucky to have a very good government. But do not forget that even islands are not immune to tsunamis. And I want people to sort of really consider, now that I've given you a clean bill of health, like everything is all good in 2022, the people who are heaving a sigh of relief and feeling like, oh, it's business as usual, need to rethink that. I've only shown you until 2022. And what I'm trying to explain to you here is that, is it logical that the US can be in a mess, and UK can be in a mess, and everybody else is in a mess, and then somehow we become the beacon of peace? It can go on for some time because the government is really good, but please be logical, right? How long is it going to be before the tsunami eventually will hit Singapore, right? We are a very small player in the world stage. And this is why I want to get people to really think through. And this is why I want you to zoom out. Don't just look at Singapore. That's the problem here in Singapore, that we only look at, Singapore is fine, like other countries die, never mind. It's like, that's not the way to look at it. Because don't forget, we are part of this timeline, that when we look at the fact that we are never ever going back to the earth mentality. So there's something else I also want to explain, is that you've heard of how sometimes when a parent takes very good care of a child, and it also means that when you become an adult, how many of you have felt that if you were very well taken care of by your parents, that when you became an adult, you didn't know what to do in the new world? Okay, so this is where sometimes I want you to put on your critical thinking cap, okay? Because many of the other people in other countries will have to learn in 2022, 23, 24, 25, 26, how to survive in the new world. And I'm going to suggest that quite a few Singaporeans are not entirely paying attention to what else is happening in the rest of the world. And this is my biggest message to the Singaporeans who are listening to this. So if I want you to focus down onto the timelines that we are very familiar with, And if you look at 1981, what was big at the time? So this is where people want to ask me what is the big industry, I pay attention to this. Now in 1981, what was important is a connection. So what was big at the time? Internet. Anything that allows us to message or to call each other, to connect with people. Now that was huge in the 80s and the 90s. That was also the time where a lot of us learned to travel and to make connections with people in other countries. So you start to see the pattern there. Technology was huge. We were excited about new things that were coming in. When we move into year 2000, notice how nobody really cares about Facebook and its connectivity or what rubbish really. All they care about is the stock price of Facebook. People ask like, wow, Facebook very good, got revenue or not? So that was the main focus. And even as we look at things like blockchain, nobody interested in the technology behind blockchain. All they care about is Bitcoin. You see, so the point is that in between 2000 to 2020, the purpose was people were not interested in technology. They were only interested in the money that comes behind technology. And see if you see what I'm talking about here, okay? But the thing is, right now, we have already crossed the line. We are now 2020, already air era already. So which means that when we look at Aquarius, now what's going to be big in Aquarius? Aquarius is for the sign of brotherhood. It's talking about things like socialism, human rights, climate change, not as climate change itself, but rather developments in the world that is going to affect all of us. And you also realize that people are slowly starting to pay a lot less attention to money, but the problem is in Singapore, that's not always the case. But that's why I beseech all of you, please pay attention to news that is outside of Singapore. So the thing is, why am I making such a big fuss about this? Because I don't know how long that tsunami is not going to hit Singapore, but I don't think it's going to last that long. Okay, so which means at some point it's going to hit. So the real point of today's webinar, now in every webinar, I introduce a concept. Now I don't introduce it all at one go because I know people cannot understand because we are all from the Earth era. You don't get it, right? So today, I think it is time for me to introduce a very crucial concept in this Earth to Air thing. Now, there is a very huge difference between value that is on paper, is a piece of paper with dollar signs on it, and tells you that something is valuable, versus what is real value, right? And I think a lot of people have started to point out that how come when the economy is down, then the stock market keep going up, which tells you that the screen and then the dollar signs that comes after it does not accurately reflect what is actually happening in the world. So this is the main point, but let me illustrate this. Consider that in the Earth era, and especially in the past 20 years, there's an obsession about home ownership. And in fact, there are lots of people selling this idea of owning multiple properties, that the more properties you have is going to make money. And of course, even last year, I got hate mail, people said that, wow, May Sim said property is going to go down, but it keeps going up, So the question really is the value of the property going up, or is the value of money going down? So that one you decide for yourself. But I also want to point out to you is that, so you actually saw like the price kept going up. But you see, when a property is worth a lot of money on paper, but you realize that the tenants, when a person rents a house, they are going to use the house. Everyone got that? When I pay rent, I'm using the house, and that use, the real value of a house is in its use and the way it works. So that's why sometimes it's very interesting when the house price is soaring. To own the house is very expensive, but rents are flat, which means that the real value of the house is in how much I'm willing to pay on a monthly basis to use the house. So this is where I'm going to show you that there is a massive mismatch here. May not be so in Singapore, but consider that worldwide this is happening. So if you think about what exactly is the real value of a house, if you try to tell a tenant, hey, my house now, the value go up, but I think you should pay more for rent. The tenant is going to say, well, like, screw this, man. All I want is 2 bedrooms and 1 kitchen and as long as the place is neat and clean and it's near my office, I really don't care, right? So the thing is, that is the real value of a house. And this is why in other countries, you start to find that there is a huge community of people who have decided, well, that I'm done with this nonsense about how property prices keep going up. And in fact, people have banded together to start creating communities. I've shared about this before, and Singaporeans have no idea what I'm talking about because it's not happening here. So it's where people band together. And I want to ask very honestly, okay, can you all go on the group chat and tell me, especially those of you who are young and who may not have the resources to fully own a property, and the people who know that you're going to take the whole life to pay and still cannot pay one, how many people actually don't mind this? Honestly, you don't mind that if you can move your family into a kind of smallish house, it's neat, it's clean, it's got 2 bedrooms and a kitchen and a working toilet, And you kind of live with people like, who don't mind, like really, just say yes on the group chat, honestly. Just be honest, right? Do you honestly give a damn whether your property is worth 5 million or whatever? Just consider that, okay? And also another thing here is that when we look at things like cities, now cities grew during the Earth era. They were huge and it became a brand name. Wow, from Paris, wow, from London, wow, from New York. And the thing is, sometimes when we think of on paper, everything that's from Paris is like more valuable than everything else from the rest of France. But if we really consider, guys, it's like that there are problems that the Earth era doesn't actually show about the genuine value of cities. Because cities, what it must, the fact that it's worth a lot of money, but what it must is that mental problems, anxiety, traffic problems, the fact that people are living so close to each other. And then when COVID happened, you found that COVID spread faster in cities than in most places. So what actually happened last year, in fact, not just last year, even now, as COVID starts to become a bit less of a problem, you'll find that it's things like that. People are asking, look, this is June the 1st, 18 days ago, headline, why are so many people leaving Paris? And also in London, you find that COVID-19 sparks an exodus of middle-class Londoners in search of the good life. They're moving away from London. And the other one is somebody said here in January that New York is not dead, but it is on life support. Now, what I want you to understand is in the Earth era, people went to the cities because it meant money. It meant value. It meant that if you bought a property, buy it in the city because it's going to go up. See, but the problem here is that right now, a lot of people think this is a temporary thing, but it's not. If you go and do your research, a lot of people they're not just buying houses outside of London, they're looking for jobs outside of London. They're also enrolling their children in schools that are outside of London. You tell me, do you think they're going back to London? It doesn't sound like it. People are leaving and they're not coming back. So the thing is, ask yourself, what does this really mean for the people who have bought into properties that were in like big name cities around the world? And what does it mean for us if there isn't a countryside to go to? What does it mean when that isn't even an option that is available? I want you to really put on your critical thinking and think properly. Okay, now another thing that happened in the Earth era was the rise of this idea of a big corporation. And we've all seen this, you know, it's like how do you know that a company is valuable? I tell you my head count, I got a lot of people inside. Or they tell you, oh, we have offices in don't know what, 28 countries or whatever, like big deal, right? So they have lots of offices, lots of people, lots of processes. But here's what, so on paper, it looks great. And the funny thing is, during the COVID period, just like the prices of property, just like the value, dollar value of the companies on stock market, it kept going up. It's like they got more and more valuable. Think about it, think carefully, right? But also for those of us who have been in this situation, ask yourself, how often does the dollar value of things and also the salaries that people were being paid? Now, some people were paid a lot of money in salary in this climate. But how do you agree with me that sometimes the dollar value that's on the paper does not reflect the true value of the company? So that means just because someone gets a higher salary does not always mean that they are the most impactful person in the company, for example. And it also doesn't reflect that just because you have a headcount of 2,000 or 3,000 people in the company does not mean that every single person is actually useful in the company, right? So just think about that. Now, the next thing here is that what actually happened, in fact, before COVID, right? But I think COVID make it so much more obvious that when you have a lot of people in the company, it's very hard to tell who is actually doing work and who's not doing work. But when you actually have companies that are tiny right now, it is not uncommon that when you look around the internet, there are 19-year-olds. There are people who are super young and they may not even have graduated from the top universities. They may not have 20, 30 years of experience, but somehow 2 people can build a company that could be worth millions in months. So what exactly does this actually mean for a lot of people who were depending on very old ways of determining value? And quite a lot of those people now, in the past 1 year, so many people have gotten in touch with me like, oh, I used to be a blah, blah, blah manager in some big company. But right now I've lost my job and when I go to apply for jobs or to try and find placements, they keep cutting my salary. Now, even as we talk about the value of money going down, but if you keep getting pay cuts, now there is a hint, sometimes economics still works. And it means that potentially the skills that used to be valuable are simply a lot less valuable now. And the funny thing about this kind of work thing is that I've spoken about this, and it's obvious. People don't need office anymore, right? So, this kind of headlines are very common now. I've never met my team because they're from all over the world, but I have lunch with them weekly. And a lot of people have started saying that, some of these new managers, new bosses that are coming up, they have very new ideas about how people work with each other. And it doesn't mean that there are no hierarchies anymore. No one really cares whether you went to Harvard or not. You know what I'm saying? And ultimately, that people, when they work in teams that are so small, and we know every single person, weird, isn't it, that we don't meet, but we do know each person. And it becomes very obvious whether somebody is actually doing work or not. So what does this actually mean for us as we think about the Earth era and the way it hides the fact that oh, I went to Harvard, so you should pay me this amount, or I used to be vice president or whatever, so you should pay me this amount. Now, is that value on paper, or is that value in real value? So when the teams become smaller and smaller, the fact is, as people are forming teams, do they want you on the team? Is the main thing. And a lot of these small groups, 8 people, 9 people, if you want to join them in the team, they are very legitimately asking you, well, what can you do for us? It's like, oh, I'm from Harvard, don't need Harvard. Oh, I have 30 years experience. Yeah, the industry is gone. So the thing is, you really need to think about what is the real value. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have no value. I'm asking you to reconsider that value is different now. Now, the next thing is also that we start to see that people think that this is temporary. Now we Zoom just temporary. Really? Take a look at this, that quite a lot of companies are asking their staff to go back to work because you know why? They sign a long lease, so now they're paying rent on a monthly basis. You better go back there and start using the office, right? But look, up to 40% of workers in more than one company are threatening to quit their job if you force me to go back to the office. So what this tells you is that just like people leaving the cities, it doesn't look like a temporary thing. So remember I said post-COVID is what is going to change our lives. It's not COVID, right? And so at this point, I want to ask questions here, okay? That in the past, we used to think about the people who invested in offices, the people who bought properties in the CBDs because it was supposed to be like the shining investment of the century. And also, I think the idea of a lot of this, the idea that there are systems that are very tied to a physical environment, okay? So that all these things, they are all being threatened right now. And please don't imagine that, one day when COVID is over, life will go back to normal. You wish. It's not going to happen. So the next here is also that when we think of businesses and how they are being positioned, when we think of big brands, you go into a supermarket and all these brands, they're all from the big boys. There are barely any products in a supermarket or even in a shopping mall that are from your random guy. No. And in fact, for the longest time, it created a false value. So that means if you were going to buy like cornflakes, for example, you wanted to buy an established brand. So everybody went and bought Post or Nestle or whatever it was because it was the best. Right. So the only thing that we do know is that these companies were so rich because they had to pay the supermarket to be able to put their products there. And what this also meant was that if you were a small player, let's just say you were very good at producing cornflakes, but you're just not Nestle, there is no hope for you to build a business in the Earth era. You got no money, sorry, you go home and no chance for you. It is only a playground for the very rich and the very wealthy. However, what people have started to realize in the past 1 year or so is that haven't you noticed there are a lot of exposés? And it turns out that a lot of these products are not more valuable than the stuff that imagine you have some old auntie who makes her own cornflakes in her home, in a farm somewhere. Maybe they grow corn and they make cornflakes. You know what I mean? Like, who's to say that Nestle or Post is producing a better cornflake than the auntie on the farm? And we've all started to realize that sometimes in the money game, you find that actually sometimes the product is less good than the one that the auntie is doing. And so the other thing, please write down in those who are taking notes, is the authenticity of the product becomes ultra important right now. It is not just about whether you associate yourself with a big brand name or whether that's powerful or not. The same thing happens with the shopping malls, and people are starting to expose how a lot of these big brands are actually highly unethical in the way they produce their goods. So the thing is, does that mean that people don't buy stuff anymore? They are buying stuff. They're just not buying it from the shopping malls and the supermarkets anymore. And what does it say about the real value of a product? So if you think like when you are a consumer and you take $10 to go out and buy something that you want to eat or you want to drink, the fact is, it's like you're like a tenant. You know, I just want to use that product and to consume it. So its value is just based on I like cornflakes and this one is very nice, so I'll just pay $10. You know, it's who really cares about whether the brand is big or not. And I want you to consider that very recently, when Cristiano Ronaldo reached over and grabbed 2 Coke bottles and moved them out of the frame, and he had that look on his face that is like, I'm a sports person and I care about health, right? So this thing, no nutritional value, put it aside. Now, when that occurs, and the value of your company drops by 4 billion almost immediately, what does this tell you about the real value of the product? And is it a fake value? So what I want everyone to really, really pay attention, just in case my message hasn't hit home yet, there is a huge difference between the real value and the paper value. But you see, for the rest of us, you find that when the product is authentic, and now the internet has allowed people to actually explain what this thing is really about, rather than the perception that has been put out there and controlled by the people who have always had money and who have made you into an android to just believe that some things are better than others, or that other things are bad and it's useless, or it's just not good. So when indie is in, and you also see things like this, you know, 26 kitchen products from Amazon that have thousands of 5-star reviews. I know some people have issues about the reviews, but I want you to be logical here. Now, I'll bet with you, I didn't read the article, but I'll bet with you that out of the 26 products that are there, at least half are probably not from the big companies. They are probably from small groups of people who maybe they love cooking, maybe they want to revolutionize the way people cook and the way people eat. And they've come together and shared their expertise with each other, and they built a product that they very humbly put on the internet. And if you like it, please leave us a review. And when thousands of people say, I tried the product, it was good, please buy this. You know, and suddenly you realize that that product, that spatula that you're using in the kitchen is actually pretty good stuff, right? And it doesn't come from a big brand. And the best part is when you pay them money, all of it goes into the product and the people who create it, and not the big companies who pay the supermarkets and the big shopping malls for basically just being part of the process, you know? So as we look into this idea, and I want you to consider that how many of you have lives right now that are inextricably tied to paper value, that you think that there is, that when you think of wealth or like the assets that you have, how many of you have like pieces of paper in your drawer somewhere that is a piece of paper that has got dollar signs on it? Or perhaps that your entire livelihood depends on a job that has a piece of paper that has dollar signs on it. And how much of those, now you are in the world, how much of those are actual backed by real value that people actually will pay for and for an exchange, or how much of it is like kind of like a bubble that is, I don't know, we are just paying for air. You know, nowadays they're selling air, right? Just so you know. Right? And so the thing is, when you think of how you're going to transit, and guys, I've been a broken record. I've talked about this for 18 months now, and I'm getting hot up already. So the thing is, as we look into the future, you need to understand that that value is never coming back. I told you world debt is at 281 trillion like 6 months ago. It's almost double that now, I think. I have no idea how much the world debt is. And if you think that something, as you start to see now, if you go online and read all these ads about people saying that, oh, you know, last month I was making this, now this month I'm making this, wow, come and join me, it's like make money. The thing is, ask yourself, is it that the value of the product or the service has gone up? Or is it more like the value of money has gone down? Okay, consider that. Now, I want to ask sincerely to all of you, like how many percent of you have truly adapted? How many of you have jobs and businesses that are dependent on the big companies that are putting out that perception? Right? And that means, remember what I said about the CLOs, right? That means you need to put on your critical thinking cap, and how much of those is going to survive what's happening in the US, what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Hong Kong, what's happening in Malaysia, and consider how can it be that all the countries will kacau at the same time? But you know, it's the same thinking, isn't it? USA will be messed up, but the rest of the world will move on. Oh, really? Or is it that all the countries are going to get hit at the same time? Go online and read about what's happening in Japan. You make your decision, okay? So the thing is, as you think about how you are going to adapt, let me tell you that please don't freak out. Humans have done this before. And I've showed this about how when the Earth moved from fire era to the Earth era. This picture is from like donkey years ago, like way before Sir Stamford Raffles, and starting from around the Shakespearean era. So this picture was pretty much what was considered a good job in those days. So if you imagine that if you come from a family where generations of people have simply done this, they sail ships, they put products on ships, and then they just go out there. Maybe you're a pirate or whatever, but pirate is also an industry at the time. But when you look at how people transform within a very short time, it went from this to this. Look at recent history and you know I'm not lying to you. So as the eras start to change from the 1700s to the 1800s, within a very short time, the world completely changed the way it operates and even how we look at money, right? So the thing is now a lot of people are going to panic because you feel like, oh, your skills are useless and there's, oh my God, look at this new confirm die. So there are people who are panicking in this way. But let me show you examples of how people can transform. And this is why in the air era, rather than you go and look at what salary you used to draw, not important anymore, what schools you went from, who cares, right? The point being that the only way you can be useful in the air era is with regard to your skills and to your knowledge. Let me show you an example here. So if you had been in the fire era and you were involved in work that looks something like this, so you produce cloth, maybe you're the tailor, and then you make clothes for people in general. But when the transition came, when the world started to move from fire to earth, and you realize that people were going to London, and these machines were showing up, and you have a big problem now because you take 1,000 hours to make one outfit, while the machine takes 1 hour to make 1,000 outfits. You die already, right? So, which means these guys became totally irrelevant at the time because people are paying for t-shirts, cheap t-shirts that could be produced by the hour, and which meant that these guys were dead. But consider that they didn't die. So what happened was they took their expertise with regard to textiles, with measuring people and understanding the cut and the design of clothing. And what did they do? They became the designers of the Earth era. They learned to mass produce, they learned to be efficient, and they learned to also, if you ask me very smartly, position their work as a high class thing. So instead of just making clothes for the random guy, you make sure that you have special occasions. So you end up paying like 100 times more than you would for a normal outfit, which is what happened, isn't it? So that's why I think what people really need to see here is that there is a mindset change. And you don't want to be an earth person and just base your new career based on like how much money you're going to make or what rank, or like, oh, I don't want to take a rank cut or a pay cut. I don't think that's the way to think about it anymore. Now, another example is, for example, people like that who were blacksmiths and they have a lot of knowledge and skills and experience with working with metals in ways that you can't even imagine. These guys have hundreds of years of experience. But you also realize that when the Industrial Revolution showed up, you had big factories that could produce metal by the tons each time. So these guys, where do they go? And sometimes it requires, sometimes transition also means that you can use the exact same knowledge and the exact same skills and to change it, to use it in a completely different way. So some of these guys, they maybe went into like defense in the military. Some people went and make weapons. But of course, there were people who don't believe in weapons because they don't like killing people. So what do? They join industries, upcoming and new industries, such as like the railroad industry, which at the time was like brand new technology. Like the way we look at space travel now is like, wow, like revolutionary, right? But they went and built the railway tracks. They went and did like, train parts and that kind of stuff. They became engineers, right? And so this is what I'm talking about, that at this point, I think if you understand that your hands, your two hands are where the real value is, and it's not in pieces of paper that have dollar signs on it. So as you are making your plans moving forward from here onwards, strategies for 2021 and beyond, okay, I want you to really pay attention to two things. They're only, honestly, as the world goes to the dogs, which it will happen, sorry, okay, but there are only two ways that you can logically contribute. Now, the first way is that understand that many of you have experience in various goods and services and industries. Now, your job is to keep calm and carry on, which is to keep goods and services going for the people, even if the big companies crash, even if entire countries crash. So notice how we've all been androids for a very long time. You just follow, they tell you go to school, then you go to school. Ask you go and get a job, you go and get a job. Never think, right? So the thing is, when you have your skills and your knowledge, that means what if the company fails? Which think whether it will happen or not. Okay, what if the country fails? Right? The thing is, people still need to go on. And you know what? Countries and companies, they are made up of people like us. And so if you have skills and knowledge, let's keep things going. Okay, so that's the first way. These are broad strokes. Now, the second is that humans are going to go crazy. That's a reality. Because the world is going to be this insanity, and you see it in other countries already. People on the street throwing bombs at each other, like really? So the ultimate truth is that if you understand, and why do you think I'm telling you this way ahead of time? So that you don't go and be one of those zombie apocalypse people, you know. And I tell you, the science fiction people, I suspect they got it right. There's going to be a zombie apocalypse, but not the type, but people go crazy. So the thing is, if those of us who understand what is going on in the world, that means some of us got to keep our heads going, which means, do we need to manage humans? People are going to be depressed. Money is going to disappear overnight. People are going to lose their jobs. They're not going to know where to go. And so the people who understand and who can help, please help to manage humans as the world transits. Right? If it's a matter of giving hope, giving support, like making sure that, you know, people have a place to go, right? So, and here's another important question here is that how much time do we really have to do this? Because it sounds like a lot of work. And for some of you, it's turning your entire life around. And how much time do we have to do this? Now, the reality is that it's not like you have a few years left to do this. You don't. We are already in the air era. So it's like, that's why when I did this about 18 months ago, when I started in 2019, I told people don't wait. If you look around now, the world is already in a mess, right? So the thing is, the people who took action 18 months ago, the fact is, I do have, some of you have been watching the huddles. I have uploaded it onto YouTube already. You can actually go and watch the huddles. And some of my students and people who I've spoken about this for a long time, they have already started making baby steps. And some of those baby steps within 18 months have become big steps. And they have become leaders in their industry, not from the dollars that they make, but from the strides that they've made to transform their industry, taking it online, taking it virtual, asking people to think of their industries in different ways. So those of you who have already subscribed to my YouTube channel, go and watch. I actually have real life success stories of people who listened and who changed their lives around. So the real truth is that you're already too late. You're already late. But I also tell you, better late than never. You want to wait until next year before you start taking action? Don't be crazy, right? But also I want to tell you that please, too late is pointless. And what do I mean by too late? For example, in 2019, when I won, and in the January event, I actually specifically said, like, the people who are doing all this retail, brick and mortar business, please take it virtual. And of course, creating a mobile app is easier said than done. But joining an existing mobile app, changing your processes to make sure that it can continue, was what saved a lot of the people who actually did listen to me. And compared to everybody else, all the food manufacturers scrambling to comply with new rules. So I'm just being mean to them. But you know, the fact is this happened in every industry in Singapore. And of course, not everybody watched the webinar. So that's why please go and, like, you know, it's too much for you to explain to people. So just get them to listen to me easier, right? So the thing is, there is such a thing as too late. And for many businesses, it was already too late. They closed down already. And there are people who have totally given up already. So the point here is, let's not be crazy. All these are resources. Our skills and our knowledge must continue. So the question, again, I want to humbly and sincerely ask all of you who are listening is, I've already told you about 2022 events. And if you are listening to me for the first time, maybe you're skeptical, maybe you're like, not sure whether she's like this little girl from Singapore can believe her or not. But those of you who have been following me, I've been accurate so far. Nothing suggests here that I'm not going to be accurate. And even though some things are kind of off the wall, right? But ask yourself, is it really that crazy? Or do you actually see it already happening in the world? So then the question is, now is June. I told you all this nonsense will happen in about May, June period next year. We have 1 year, guys. What are you planning to do in this meantime? And let me tell you what most people will do. They just go back to their jobs. Today is Saturday, right? Monday, they just go back. Then Sunday, they just watch TV, watch Netflix. And then just don't do anything. They just, just wait. Then at most, they'll tell their friend, hey, that day I attend this webinar. This woman are quite accurate, Then they go watch. They're quite interesting, right? Interesting, right? And the thing is, you know what's going to happen in May? You're going to be one of those guys, right? That is in May and June. That means you scramble. And I often tell people that it's like if I'm correct, you'll be glad you did something. But let's just say I'm wrong, I'm lousy, I anyhow say I'm wrong. The thing is, if you start to move your life in that direction, I have a funny feeling that it might sort of decrease anxiety, make sure that you are agile and you're able to sort of move with the changes. I actually don't see any downside to actually listening to this. And at this point, I think that my attitude has also changed a little bit in the last 18 months. Now, last year, I was very compassionate because I know that this hit a lot of people. And it's very hard for me to say, yeah, why you never listen to me? But sometimes people need to see that this works. And sometimes it's a bit like, I think people were caught unawares. And it wasn't fair because the world never showed that it was going in that direction. Everyone thought it was going one way, but it turned out another way, right? So I understand last year was about making sense. And I took a lot of time to explain to people what was going to happen. But I think by now, it's been 18 months into this nonsense already. And if right now it doesn't hit home, right, the fact is this year is about making choices. If you're still at the stage where you're just still deciding whether want to do, don't want to do, the fact is too late already. Okay, you need to be really clear about right now from this moment on, all the choices that you're making and the mindset choices that you choose to make. So just to make things really clear to all of you, okay, and this slide actually came out of the fact that in the last 1 year, 18 months, me and my team, we spoke to so many people. We've got people, after people watch my webinars, I have 40,000 people watch my webinars last year. And we had countless people writing us emails, texting us, sending all sorts of things, getting on the phone with us. And we've spoken to lots of people. And it became very clear to my team that there are actually two very distinct types of people. And I'm going to show you on this slide that some people make earth choices and some people make air choices. And just to make it really clear, I'm actually going to share with you specific things, the questions that they ask us tells us exactly what their mindset is. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to decide for yourself, right? Right now, which category are you in? Based on my presentation, I tell you that the conclusion that earth people make from my today's presentation and the conclusion that the air people make are two completely different things. So let me show you actual questions. And if it turns out that you are in the earth side, and I suspect most people are still in the earth side because they cannot conceive of an air world, consider if you are willing to take my advice and start changing the way you think. Now, the first is that when people ask me, so Maya, can you see my chart? What job should I apply for? So what if I answer this question? How long is your job going to last for? Is it actually going to help you? And it tells me that the only thing that ultimately you're going for, now some people say, oh, I want fulfillment, whatever, but let me tell you what they're really going for. A place to lodge themselves so that at the end of the month, they get a piece of paper with dollar signs on it. That is their ultimate aim. And that is very different from the kind of questions that air people ask me, which is what natural skills do I have, my hands, that are relevant in the air era? And you can see that the mindset is about transition. Like how can I still be useful versus where do I go so that someone will pay me money? You all see the difference? Now, some people also ask me, lots and lots of people ask me, hey, May, I'm considering doing this business or I'm considering this investment. That was very popular also. People ask me, hey, May, can you see from my chart, if I do this business or this investment, will I be successful? And of course, when they say successful, what they really mean is, am I going to make money? And if I said yes, all they're imagining is buying properties and being idle, going to Italy and like, I don't know, having holidays for the rest of your life. So the thing here is that when success is measured by, again, a balance sheet with dollars on it. So this is where, if that is your ultimate aim, it becomes a bit hard for you to consider this other thing, which is who and how many can I benefit with these skills? Because ultimately in the air era, that is, if you want to think about the blacksmith that changes things, it's like nobody wants your blacksmith skills anymore. But if you went and did something with the railroad, do you know that millions and billions of people will now benefit from that railroad and from your skills and your expertise? It's just a different way of thinking. Another is that this is another common trend that's come up because the world is going to the dogs. And a lot of people, they know it at the pit of their stomach that it's just not going to improve earth-wise from here. So which means a lot of people have become depressed, cannot find job. Then it's like everything very expensive. Then my boss like this and that made me work very hard for very little money. So now they're very depressed. And I've gotten a massive amount of people writing to me and May, I'm looking for my life purpose. And I tell you, 9 out of 10 people who contact me ask me this. But the problem with this is that a lot of times this life purpose is like an escape. And there's this thinking, and I'm not sure whether is it popular media about astrology that tells you that, wow, you know, if you find your life purpose, everything's going to be awesome. And that's a little bit of a different, I'm not saying it's not awesome, but it's very different when people are asking me questions about, now what work can we now use those skills for? How do we structure things so that we can benefit as many people as possible? Now, when you compare the two, I want you to notice that the people who want to find their life purpose, they only care about themselves. That means me, my life purpose, what's going to make me happy, and what's going to make me be able to get away from this miserable, horrible life. And let me tell you that those people they don't always know where to go. So they get very frustrated with me because so what if I do your chart? Then ultimately they go, but me, I'm still lost. I'm still directionless. I still don't know what to do. But you see, the air people are very different. And that's why, for me, when I look at all the people I've conversed with, there is a very, very clear divide. And when people ask me, how do I structure this? That means they are, in fact, considering now, okay, if I'm very good at doing this thing, now how can we position this in a way? How do we disperse it? How do we put it online so that more people can come and benefit from this skill set that we have, this knowledge that we have? And this also includes, how are you, well, at least until the currency fails, the fact is the world still operates on currency. So does it mean that money is like zero? No. The fact is, you still need to make money. You still need to have your operations continue. Because once your operations fail, that means you cannot benefit other people. So when these people charge and they make money from their work, it is so that they can continue doing so. Okay, so that's a very big difference between the two. And also, a lot of people come and tell me, I hate my job. Then can you see my chart? Is that got easier things to do now? So I don't want to work so hard already. I want to do easy things, but they still can make money or not. And this is the ultimate Earth era thing, where if you see what is the aim of this is to escape. That means a lot of these people are aiming for what I call an idle life. That means they don't want to work anymore. They really, really hate their job. They want to retire. They want financial freedom and financial independence. I know everything I'm saying here is like against the grain of what a lot of people are saying. And I know I'm going to be unpopular, but I don't care, right? So the point here is that if you look at a lot of these air people, the funny thing is they may or may not want to leave their job. That's something I realized, that a lot of these people were actually pretty good at their job already. That means these people have a track record of a desire to do good things in their career. And that's why they're usually successful. But at this point, many of them are feeling that they want to move away from what has worked for them in the Earth era, because they also understand that there is a transition period here. And the question that they're asking right now is that, how can I now do things that are a bit more meaningful? And I've lost count of a lot of air people who tell me, actually, my current job is okay. I have decent salary, but they also tell me that their needs are lesser and lesser. So often the pattern is this, they start to realize that actually I don't need so much money. I get a pretty high salary, but I'm starting to think that I'm at a point where I don't really care how much money I make because my life is very simple. Now we're all stuck at home. What are you spending on anyway? A lot of these people want to find ways that we can help as many people as possible to sort of accept this air mindset so we can move on with our lives and don't bother about that crap that's already dying already. So when you look at all these air people, you realize that there is the words here there are two things that strike me about them. Number one is leadership, that they are taking responsibility for their lives and not just making changes to their lives, but they're also looking at the people who will follow them, whatever industry you're in. And those people they want to lead first. I walk first, and if I'm okay, I'll go and tell people, come on, come with me, right? That's a leadership. Now the second is this concept of freedom, that these people are realizing more and more that the old world was very Android. It was very zombie. Like I said, like people ask you to do what you just do. You never use your brain and think. So right now, a lot of these air people are realizing that, wow, actually there's a lot of inauthenticities in the Earth era. And what they're trying to do is, okay, now I want to take my expertise. Maybe I'm very good at marketing, or I'm very good at managing resources in a bank. And a lot of people come and ask me, hey, I work for a bank and like that I die already, is it? But no, because your strength is in management of resources. Now, if you are able to sort of change that in order to serve people and explain to people how we can use resources, and it's not just money, there are other resources too. Manpower is resources, time is resources. And one day when food, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to food supply, but if it should ever be limited in some ways, well, somebody has to have a good brain on their head to help all the people ration food and to see how we can best use resources. And this is exactly what I mean. That freedom means that we no longer have to take instructions from some faceless entity who seems to know better than you, because we get to decide for ourselves. And what I want to do with these people is to give them a tool. These people don't need me to tell them what to do with their lives, but what they needed was a tool to get clear. But you see, if you look at a lot of these earth people, the thing is, it's very hard to work with them sometimes, because they're asking me to do things that even if I make your dream come true, I don't have a life purpose. Can you tell me what my life purpose is? So what if I tell you? But in the end, nothing actually comes out of it. It's very frustrating for all people involved. So for the air people, we know that we are at the cusp of human history. 200 years from now, people are going to look back at us and say that, well, we were the really cool people who learned to live one way. We grew up in the earth era and we became the people to transit into the air era. I don't know about you, but if you can get out of our little tiny lives, right, that's pretty awesome. I think it's awesome, and I'm an astrologer, right? So the thing is, you want to look back and live with no regrets, that we've actually done something very meaningful with our lives. But I also want to tell a lot of the earth people that if you don't break out of this ASAP, you're going to regret your life. That a lot of the things that we work for, pieces of paper with dollar signs on it, is not going to make you happy. Frankly, it hasn't made you happy in the last few years, and I'm not really sure why people think it's going to make them happier in the coming years. It's probably not. So ultimately, the thing is, to the people who are air people, I have 3 things to share with you. Okay, now, the first is that you need to have some clarity on your role. Because as you move into the air era, the skills and the knowledge may be the same, but your role may be different. So that means some people may change industries completely. You may move into spaces that you totally don't even know much about, but you want to go there and you want to contribute. And that also sometimes, like, you may take a leadership role in some, and you may take a follower role in others. And I think sometimes in the earth world, we have been allocated according to some factors that don't necessarily accurately describe who we are. I've lost count of the people who tell me, oh, I'm a manager, or they ask me to come up with new projects, but actually I'm not so good at coming up with new projects. I'd rather go to existing projects, and I think I'm better as a manager rather than a starter. So, but the thing is, in the past, in the earth era, it wasn't the best at helping us decide what was really the right space for us to use the skills that we already have. So I'm asking you to spend this time to really think about what role can you actually play that makes you the most effective. And the second is to recognize that you are human as well. That means as the world starts to get really, really messed up, the fact is you're going to be affected psychologically and emotionally. You're going to lose confidence. You're going to get scared. And it's like one day, if I'm correct, and if these papers, when papers with dollar signs on it become nothing more than just paper, you're going to panic. you're going to go like, oh my God, it's like, what am I going to do? So the thing is, what's important is to recognize that when we go into that space, it means that we stop operating. Am I making sense? So the thing is, you need to find ways to sort of manage yourself. We don't just manage other humans, we got to manage ourselves too. Especially as we start to, that's why I say the faster we adjust into that, the better we are calm when things actually happen. Now, the last is that also, please consider whose advice you're following right now. And I want to point out is that, remember I said all these people say it's unprecedented and I said it was bullshit, right? So you realize that a lot of big organizations, I have nothing against the OECD, right? I'm talking about like organizations in general. When they talk about something being unprecedented, consider that when you go to a lot of these consultants, a lot of these financial advisors, bank people, government officials even, that a lot of times when they say it's unprecedented and they give advice or they start to make predictions or forecasts, now, when they look at a chart, when they look at their laptop and they see those charts there, let me tell you something. Their charts don't go back any more than 30 years for most of the time. That means the data that they have is only based on a very, very, very short area of human history. And that's why to them, they think it's unprecedented. But for you, having sat through my webinar, understand that there are a lot of experts out there that are giving earth advice. There's advice that works in the earth era, but it is not going to work in the air era. Because, and the thing is, for a lot of these people, they are still thinking in the earth choices and they are not making air choices. That means the way to deal with things could be if there are human unhappiness. Sometimes it is important to deal with the human unhappiness rather than to deal with the money problem. And that's something that I'm saying here. So the thing is, the problem with this kind of earth advice is that it's very flat. And you find that most of these advice just tell you to, oh, how to earn more, how to charge higher, how to spend less. It's all money-based and resource-based. But I'm going to suggest here that as many of us air people are starting to realize is that the money doesn't solve a lot of problems. Mental health is a big problem right now. People are anxious. And the thing is, there are a lot of issues with rights. And of course, some of the best people who can contribute the best are not getting their space out there, while the people who are getting their space out there are not necessarily the best in the world. What I'm trying to explain here is that the world is a round place. It is not flat. And therefore, if the world is round, I'm suggesting that we need to change the kind of tools that we are using. You see that I'm not the only person out there asking people to sort of change the way we think about money. But of course, those are not the famous people. And sometimes it's easier to find people like us on YouTube than in official papers and stuff. And our official people are official people, YouTube and on the internet, and humble people like myself and some not so humble ones, like even people like Jack Ma and a couple other people. Robert Kiyosaki, for example, has been warning people for the longest time that money isn't what it used to be. Those of you who have read his books. So I'm suggesting here is that you want to, if you are looking for advice to follow right now, consider that there are advice that takes into consideration not just the very lame data from the last 30 years, but really looking at humanity as a whole. Because what's happening to us right now is not a market problem, it is a humanity problem, that humans are changing. And therefore, I'd like to humbly suggest that astrology is one of the ways that I have found have helped not just me, but I've already helped 40,000 people who have watched my webinars. Okay, so when a person is an air person, you need to understand at this point that what you're looking at is a transition. The fact is the world is still at its last legs of the Earth era. So which means the first thing that you need to think about is as you start to build what it is that you are building for the air era, at least in the short term, there has to be some way to survive in terms of the Earth considerations, but that you are not held back by the Earth considerations, but rather these are the resources that you are using to build for what is coming. And that a lot of these people will be a lot calmer one day when the tsunami shows up, when it takes away a lot of this earth value, all this paper money with dollars on it. Guys, if you all don't believe me, go and look at the Song dynasty. They were very rich and they were decimated just like that. I know it hasn't happened in the Earth era. I know that global crises go down, can go up. Then it's like currency fail, George Soros can make a lot of money. It's not going to happen this time around. Okay, nothing in my charts tells me it's going to happen that way this time around. So don't be stupid. Right? So this air people need to keep ourselves afloat so that later when the time comes, the leaders on the ground can show up. Not the world leaders, but people on the ground who can keep calm and lead others. So when we talk about thriving in the air era, now I had to make choices, but I didn't make my choice this year. I made mine 2 years ago in 2019. As an astrologer, I make my money primarily from consultations and teaching astrology. This is the truth. In 2019, I made a painful decision to stop. I actually stopped seeing clients and I stopped teaching astrology because I wanted time, number one, to do the calculations that you are all seeing right now on my webinars. And the second was I wanted to create a different kind of program that is not about teaching astrology. And I really don't care whether it helps to make people money in the long run, but rather gets people clarity about where they need to go. And when you strip away the educational qualification and all the dollars and the assets that you got, what is it with your bare hands that is still going to be relevant in the air era and it can still be useful? So the thing is, I decided that rather than going to a few big fish, it used to be that if you catch the big fish, wow, you can charge him a lot of money. But I decided to go the other way, that I'm really not interested in the big fish. Some of you watching this may even have been business owners who approached me. And you might have discussed with me, oh, I'm willing to pay how much? Like, May, you're very accurate, please read my chart. And how many of you have been turned away by me? I didn't want your money because I was not convinced that you were thinking in an air era person. I only want to work with air era people now. I'm not interested in earth people, even if it means that I lose most of my business, because logically, more people are earth than air. But now I only want to work with air people because I have no time and it's only 1 year left. Right. So ultimately, what's the purpose of the course? Now, is it an astrology course? Yeah, it kind of is, because that's my expertise. But what's important is the angling behind it. That means when you look into your profile, because astrology doesn't care how much money you have. What astrology cares about is with your bare hands. Who among us are the data analysts? Who among us are the cooks? And you really know how to make food, simple food, taste good and nutritious for people. That is value to me. Right? Who are the people who are musicians, who understand the power of music and how it can rally people in times of crisis? Now, this is where suddenly as people, and we can fulfill the Aquarius idea, the ideal here, that when people stick together, the world continues moving. And this is how, as regular, humble people like us, we can keep the world going, even if the big guys let everybody down. So here's where I'm going to talk about the logistics behind this. I know some people are thinking about doing it, some people are not, and I'm not offended either way. Now, my course dates are always set in advance. And my next schedule, the next schedule date is actually very far from now. And we've already spoken to some people and they complain about how far away the date is. Now, the next date is actually on the 7th and the 8th of August. In this program, I get people to look at their birth charts. Now, do you need to study a bit of astrology? Yes, you do. But I have now angled it in such a way that people see it as a way of looking. It's like an instruction manual for this machine. And how is this machine going to be useful in the future? So when we look at the date like this, a lot of people actually complain. But I want to be very frank with all of you. My schedule is packed. And today is the 19th of June. From now until the 7th of August, I am teaching every weekend. And every weekend has got students in it already. So the thing is, I spoke to my team and I asked them sincerely now, I'm going to do a webinar today on the 19th of June, right? And the thing is there any possibility that we can do this a little bit earlier? I asked them to look at my schedule. We did come out with a date. But those of you who have done seminars and webinars and you know of people out there who are selling stuff, the date that we came up with doesn't make any sense, okay? And this date is actually next Saturday. It's next Saturday and Sunday. And it doesn't make sense because most of the time when people are selling to make money, they will never put one week time frame because that's when sales is bad. And the thing is, the honest truth is, I know that too, but that is the only date that's available in my schedule and that is the truth. So the reality is, when I looked at this, originally I was concerned. I was like, I'm not really sure if people have time to react. But the more I think about it, I like it. Because the reality is, I'm not concerned about the quantity of the people who are in the class. I'm very concerned about the quality of the people. And if they are Earth people, we give them their money back and we tell them not to come for the class. And we have done that many, many times in the last 18 months. And you have to decide after listening to me for 3 hours, whether I'm telling you the truth or not. So what happens is now, if you are deciding between these two dates, I honestly feel that because actually both dates are the cost fee is the same. So if you are deciding between the two, I know it's short notice, but doing the earlier one in the context of now having a year before the world gets a little bit messed up, I ask you to consider what is the value of having 2 extra months to work with a tool and start building rather than waiting for the course date to happen. The cost fee is the same. Now, the second reason why the first course date might be a little bit more valuable is because, let me tell you, all the procrastinators, all the depressed people, all the, I'm not really sure, like, like nene people, right? They will not sign up for this date. So that means if you happen to be a participant in this date, even if I have very few people, even if there's only 7 or 8 people, I actually don't care. Right? Because these, I know, and I'm looking forward to it, that these people are going to be probably the most quality batch I've ever gotten, because these people understand that the action needs to be taken. And I know I'm not going to have a hard time trying to convince them that, guys, we need to do some shit here. Right? So the thing is, now some logistics here is that my class runs from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and I'm an intense teacher. So please know this beforehand, I'm very intense. I'm not in the habit of giving long breaks. So be prepared that I am going to be intense. Now, the course fee is $697. There are no bells and whistles about it. It's not the kind of webinar where if you stick around, then it's like, then I'll give you bonuses, or it's like, or if you sign up in the next 10 minutes, I'll give you a discount. There's nothing like that. So this amount is super transparent. What does this do? It keeps my team going so that we can keep doing the next webinar so that more courses are going to happen. Now, my course is only limited to 20 people. And just now during the break, my team has informed me we already have 5 people in this upcoming class, 26 to 27 of June. 5 people have already signed up. I only have 15 slots left. Now, do I care whether or not the course is going to be full or not? No. What I want to do is I want to get this going ASAP. And I know that right now, when this thing gets uploaded, it's not unusual for my videos to get up to thousands of views at any one time. So the main thing is I want to get the right people in, and that's what's important to me. Okay, so a few important things that I definitely want to make very, very clear here is that there are some logistics involved. Now, the course involves hard copy and soft copy materials. Soft copy is easy. We'll send it out to people as long as they're in the class. But if you are from outside of Singapore, now if your enrollment gets accepted after Monday, is there a possibility, a chance that you may not get your hard copy materials on time? Yes. So if that happens to be the case, I'd like to humbly request, please don't yell at my staff. Please don't get angry with them. They're trying their best to get the materials to you as far as possible. Okay, we've actually had that happen in the past 1 year. And if people yell at my staff, I will give you back your refund and I'll tell you not to come to my class because I don't think you understand what this is about. Another thing is that if you sign up for the 26 and 27, I have no idea how many people are going to sign up. But if there's a chance that my team might call you in the next 2 to 3 days to sincerely ask you to move yourself to the 7 and 8 August and possibly even to later course dates than 7 and 8 August, mainly because sometimes we just don't know how many people will sign up. And again, and I'm going to humbly request, please don't yell at my staff. They're trying their best to put people in the classes as soon as possible. Now, last year, we've had certain webinars where lots and lots of people sign up all at the same time, and we had to ask people to leave, and some of these people got angry and yelled at my staff, right? So if you do that, I will not accept your money and you don't come to my class. Okay, let's be really clear about that. My team works really, really hard, and we are not going to take this from anyone, okay? So the next year, I'm going to get my guys, can you all put the link down? Okay, put the link down. And whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, I put the link there. Okay, but what's important here is I want to make absolutely clear who should attend and who should not. Now, when you talk about people who are not supposed to attend, I want to be really clear that the people who think that just by discovering your life purpose, that life is going to be easy, that is not going to be the case. Now, if you think about your mobile phone, your laptop, if you buy the laptop for it to serve its purpose, it has to work. The moment the laptop stops working, it has no more purpose. So what this tells me is that if you are looking for a life purpose, then you better have a function in the world, especially in this new world. So anyone who's hoping that if you discover your life purpose, especially if you think that, oh, it's my dream to be astrologer so that I can read charts for people, 2 people per week, then after that I can earn money and live, that is not a life purpose, right? Real people who do work are the people with the purpose. Now, another thing is that if you have 0% idea what you want to do with yourself, and sometimes people get angry with me, it's because I don't know what to do with myself, that's why I come to an astrologer. And this is where I beg to differ. Because if somebody comes to me and you have the mindset of an Olympic champion, you may not be a champion right now, but when you go to someone and say, can you help me be good at what I do? Now, it really helps if you tell me whether you want to be a swimmer or you want to be a short putt person, or you want to be a sharpshooter, an archer, or whatever. Now, it doesn't help if you can't tell me, hey, mate, I want to be Olympian, but I don't know what event I should go for. And what this means is that they're expecting me to tell them what event they're going for. And guys, you know what? It really doesn't work that way. So if you are in that space where you have 0% idea what you want to do with yourself, now I suggest you don't give me any money. There are things that you can do for free. Go and watch some YouTube videos. Go and talk to the people that you've worked with in the past. Ask them how you have been helpful to them. And maybe you might get some idea of like in what area of life you can be of use to people. Please don't give me any money because you're going to get upset with me when I basically talk about how you can be effective. But talking about being effective is different from whether you should be a swimmer or an archer, right? So you got to decide that for yourself. It is not astrology that will tell you what you will do. Another thing is that if you are in that space where you are very depressed, you feel sad, you feel like directionless. Like I said, I have limited time now, and I really want to work with the air people who are ready to take a tool and start doing something with it. So if you are in that space where you're like, help me, May, I'm very sad, I'm very depressed. Now I'm going to suggest that rather than coming to an astrologer, I really don't recommend Mason for that purpose. You might want to try counselors. There are lots of very good counselors out there. You might also want to try going to a professional psychologist. And there are also other spiritual practitioners who specialize in making people feel better about situation. The problem here is that Mason is just not one of them. Now, if you belong in this category, keep your money. And there are other things that you need to do with yourself before you show up in my class. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Now, if you choose to attend this class, now I want you to understand there's work to do. And for the people who understand that the world requires leaders who are going to get together, one thing that my students really love from my class is that the quality of the people is amazing. If you've ever been to lousy skills future class where everybody is just there collecting government grants, right, and everyone's playing with their phone, that's a crappy class. Now, what you want to do is get into a class where the people actually are going to use what they've got. And a lot of my students have started collaborating. and they started putting things online. They've started like working out ways in which they can collaborate. Now, in one of my huddles, you see there's Amanda Blum and Jeremy Tan. Both of them deal with like human psychology and helping people deal with storytelling, dealing with the emotional stuff. Amanda is from the UK. Jeremy Tan is from Singapore. And the thing is, I can already see the seeds of people learning to connect and learning to say, okay, how can what you do contribute to what the people in the UK are doing? I think it's wonderful. And the people who are truly air people, you know what I'm talking about. That is so amazing to deal with people who are action takers, and we don't have to deal with the people who are just complaining about how the world is ending, right? So the other thing is understand that there are people to help. So that means when you come, I'm not helping you. I'm helping you be useful to other people in the air era. And if you choose to sign up for my course, please understand the difference, right? And that's why I tell you the people in my class, they are amazing, right? They're not here for themselves. They're here because they understand the world is going to need us. Humble people like us on the ground. Okay. So thank you for that. And I want to end off my presentation with this quote. We cannot control world events. None of us can control what's happening in the US and in our monetary system. But ultimately, we can control the plans that we make in our lives. You still have power. Don't let governments or big companies tell you what we can or cannot do. The internet has given us a lot of power. And it's down to, do you want to make the decisions? Are you willing to make the sacrifices? Even if it means that you first have to understand that we're moving from earth to air. Now, the next is also get your shit going, right? So this is the quote that I want to end with, right? So for the people who are going to join me in my class, I'll see you in class. And for the people who you feel that you're still struggling with the death of the earth era, my sincerest advice to you is don't wait too long, right? Don't take too long to get out of that earth thing, because it's going to be tough. If your entire life is based, if your entire human value is based on what is a piece of paper with dollar signs on it, I think you are going to have a very, very, very hard time. And you will be among the people whom all these leaders have to help and pull along the way when things happen, right? So don't do that, right? Try your best to get out. And always remember that what you can do with your hands, the skills and the knowledge and what we can do for people now, that is a value that will remain with you no matter what happens in the world, right? And for everyone else who has watched this webinar, and if you found this useful, whether you do the course or don't do the course, it's immaterial. Right? If you've listened to me for about 3 hours now and you found this really, really good, now I have a very simple request from you that within the next 48 hours, my team is going to upload this webinar onto our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to my channel already, you get a notification. Now, my request is this: if you could just take 2 minutes, just 2 minutes from your life, because we have not charged you a cent for this webinar, and my team has worked really hard to do this. If you could take 2 minutes to go on my YouTube channel and leave a comment on the video. Let us know if there's anything that we've said today or presented that really makes a difference to your life and how you're going to change your plans. And the clarity, if you've gotten clarity, please let us know. It will really make a difference to us. And also the thing is, sometimes when people go onto a YouTube channel and they see that the video is like 3 hours or 4 hours, their first instinct is, so long. Then they're deciding whether or not this content is even worth their time to watch. And I found that a lot of people tell me, in fact, people have told me that it's because I saw your video so long, I was thinking I don't want to watch, But I scrolled down, I saw that all these people seem to have gotten value. And that's why I decided to watch your video. So please understand that in the air era, even your humble comment on a YouTube channel can make a difference to whether somebody is prepared for what's happening in the world or not. Okay, so this is my humble request. Lastly, I want to thank my team, okay, because it's been a grueling 3 weeks of non-stop work for us. In fact, it's been a grueling half a year. No, it's been a grueling 18 months here. So I thank my team. And with that, I'm going to end my webinar. So those who want to get that link, you might want to click that link. Otherwise, you can probably find that link somewhere on my YouTube channel or on my Facebook page. You will find the link if you're looking for it, okay? So I'm going to end my webinar here. Thank you and goodbye.